Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the workshop meeting of the Commonwealth Transportation Board for October. First item on the agenda this morning is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'll join with me in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. What a great opportunity to be here today, and thanks to Mr. Jack Potter and MWA and the folks here at Reagan National for hosting us. And the idea when we were coming up here was to see some of our assets, and certainly this is a key place here in Northern Virginia, and really for the capital of the country, servicing the folks that work in Washington D.C. particularly. A lot of our leaders from across the lands who fly in and out here on a regular basis. I'll note that if you look to your left where the flag is, you'll note there's a clock over there, and it's not daylight savings time. If you look to your right, there's a clock over there, and it is daylight savings time. So just pick whatever one you choose to be on today, but for this meeting, it's officially the one to your right, if you're in the audience. We've got some folks here as well with us today. I want to thank our staff, of course, as we always do. Whenever we travel, it's hard to do this. I mean, we come to a different place, we bring all this stuff with us, all these people and all this equipment, and it takes a lot of work, and Carol and all the rest of the VDOT staff and others who put this on, and all our staff has to travel when we go. And so it's just a lot of work, and I want to recognize the folks that do all this, because we walk in and eat Danish and have yogurt and coffee, and like it's just there. Well, it's not just there. It gets here somehow. And so I appreciate that very much. I'd also like to acknowledge Kate Mattice is here today from Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. There she is. Kate, nice to see you. And we've got some folks that starting our agenda off this morning from WMATA as well. We've got a great day today. We've got a lot of work to do. And then this afternoon, we're going to look at some of our assets around the area. And of course, tomorrow we'll have our action meeting and then roll right into the transportation conference for the balance of the week. So I appreciate everybody being here. And with that, I'm going to call on Ms. DeBrule, Director DeBrule, to kick us off.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The first item on our agenda this morning is an update from our partners at the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. I'm just going to give you a little, I'm going to set them up a little bit and remind you that last month I briefed you on the annual certifications and also gave you a 5-year capital look back at the investments that the Commonwealth, along with our partners in DC and Maryland, have made in the metro system over the past 5 years since we've had dedicated capital funding. That briefing that you had last month is summarized in a one-pager that's in your folder that summarizes the board responsibilities as it pertains to WMATA. They're very specific and prescribed by code, and there's not a lot of discretion beyond the items that I presented to you last month, all of which WMATA is in compliance with. That being said, we did see legislation passed in the last General Assembly session, a bill that was proposed by the governor and passed by the General Assembly that included some additional accountability measures for Metro, and one of those we're fulfilling today. This board just adopted our new WMATA policy statement last month, and so this month we have our Metro GM along with our Virginia board members here to address the board and fulfill that requirement, that new code requirement that's just gone into effect. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul Smedberg, who is the Commonwealth's representative on the Metro board and also serves as the Metro board chair to kick off their presentation.
Welcome, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Secretary Miller and board members. Thank you for having us today. As the director said, I'm joined by Randy Clark, who is the general manager of WMATA, and Supervisor Matt Letourneau, who is the other Virginia board member. We have a presentation that we put together for you. You should have it in your packet. I'm going to start off with just a couple slides, and then I'll turn it over to Supervisor Letourneau, and then he'll be followed by Mr. Clark. Just a little bit about me. I have a career in government affairs and policy, mainly in the healthcare arena, but I did serve 17 years on the City of Alexandria City Council, during which I had the opportunity to serve on several regional bodies. I served on the VRE board, which I chaired twice, and also on the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, again, which I also chaired twice. And now I have the honor of serving as chair of the Metro Board. So your first slide, I'll highlight Metro at a glance. Metro is definitely coming back, and we should all be very proud of that. If you look, we have a $4.8 billion budget.
We need, there we
I'm
go.
sorry. Was I supposed to do that? Okay, all right. Sorry about that. We are the second busiest U.S. transit system in the nation, and we have the 6th largest bus network. In Virginia, if you look down, we have 128 miles of rail, but in Virginia we have 54 miles of rail and 32 stations. I want to highlight 2 events that recently took place, which we're obviously very proud and excited about: the extension of the Silver Line, and just a few weeks ago we had our 1,000,000th rider who got off at Dulles Airport, so that's very exciting. And then also the opening of the Potomac Yard Station just down the street, where Virginia Tech is building its billion-dollar new graduate campus, and we also have 4 headquarter buildings located right there at the station. So it's been a very, very busy year. We hired Mr. Clark a little over a year ago. It seems a lot longer than that, actually, all we've been through. But it has been a very, very busy year. And, you know, I want to say that, thank you, Randy, that, you know, when we hired Randy, we really wanted to go sort of outside the box and bring someone from the outside who would really look at the organization, eyes wide open, and really take a critical view and look at what we were doing, how we were doing it. And I think Randy has really met all our expectations in that regard. We have a staff realignment, we have a new level of transparency and budget operations that like we've never had before. So we really appreciate the work that Randy has done over the last year, and I think you can all see the results in that. I want to highlight just a couple things on this slide before I turn it over to Mr. Letourneau. We have 22 miles of new track that have been rebuilt, and then obviously the Silver Line extension. We have 7 new stations system-wide. We have a 16% increase in rail satisfaction and 2% increase in bus satisfaction amongst our riders. And then we have $100 million invested in transit-oriented development in and around metro stations. So those are just some of the highlights, and again, you can see this here, but wanted to just sort of level set everyone on that. And now I'll turn it over to Supervisor Letourneau.
Good morning. Thank you for having us, Mr. Secretary.
Welcome, sir.
As Paul said, I'm Matt Letourneau. I'm in my 12th year serving on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. I am the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission's representative to the Metro Board, which means I represent all the localities here in Northern Virginia on the board. Just a quick about me. In my private life, I'm the Managing Director of Communications at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which is the world's largest business organization. Before that, I worked in the U.S. Senate for 8 years. Here in the region, I was chairman of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments and also the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission. On the Metro Board, I have the enviable task of being chairman of our Finance and Capital Committee. So we always enjoyable, especially in this environment, which has been difficult for transit. So going to the next slide for a sec, I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of what's happening with our our budget. So for our FY24, we have a $2.4 billion operating budget and a roughly $2.4 billion capital budget. You can see what the source of our fundings are. About half come from state and local fundings. Right now in FY24, 23% of our budget is coming from federal COVID relief. Of course, that relief is going to be expended at some point in the next year, and that's really created a lot of the pressure, not just for Metro, but for transit systems around the country, of which, as Paul said, we're one of the largest. We collected about a little over $500 million in revenue, and then you can see debt service. On the capital side, and this is something I'll emphasize in a second, but our capital program has improved dramatically. We were very fortunate to receive dedicated funding from the states, including the Commonwealth, for which we're truly appreciative, $500 million. That has been put to good use. That money is being spent. I believe we have one of the best capital delivery teams in the country now. But you can see from our capital budget, debt proceeds about $800 million, the dedicated funding. We do receive significant federal formula that has gone up. With the infrastructure bill, there's more money coming from the federal government on the capital side, not on the operating side, as well as the PREA match. So just kind of looking at where we are in the region, Metro really has been driving economic growth in Northern Virginia, and nowhere have we seen that more than where I live in Loudoun County with the Silver Line coming. Tremendous opportunities exist there already, some things on the ground that are really exciting, but amazing statistics here. Within a half a mile of Metro rail stations in the compact area, 60% of the population in the Washington region live, 70% of the jobs, half the employers. And then when you look from a property value standpoint, just 3% of the land in the region, which is half a mile around our metro station, is generating 30% of the property value. So we are serving the most valuable parts, and because we're there, it is generating economic opportunities, as well as 65% of new office development. When employers look at where they want to be, where they want to locate, especially here in the Commonwealth, they want to be near our Silver Line. They want to be near our Orange Line and our Yellow and Blue lines here in this part of Northern Virginia. And then just as I mentioned on the capital program, we had a legacy, unfortunately, at Metro and in the region of not properly maintaining the system. There is no getting around that. For decades, the amount of investment that was needed was just simply not being made. So the region decided in 2018 to come together, do the dedicated funding, and as you can see, we've dramatically reduced that overdue maintenance with a state of good repair program that's getting out there. I believe that now we have one of the best systems from a technical standpoint in the country in terms of our rail lines, our electrical systems, all those sorts of things. And we've seen those results. Some of those headlines that Metro used to make for a lot of these incidents, way down. We're just not seeing them anymore. And so that's something that everybody in this room should be proud of. So I'm going to turn it over to Randy now, who's going to walk you through kind of what's going on from a ridership and a system. And just to reiterate what Paul said, Randy has come in and really taken a 360-degree look at the organization. The board, very soon after he came, passed a new strategic plan. It's a real strategic plan, not just a piece of paper, and we're following it. And I think you've seen that with the results from Randy.
I'll take that. Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Letourneau and Chair Smidberg. Good morning, Mr. Secretary, members of the board. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you today. I'm going to follow up with what Board Member Letourneau mentioned, go right into some of the kind of key things that are going on at Metro. Ridership is obviously what we do, right? Moving people is our function. And I'm happy to report that our ridership is starting to rebound pretty solidly after the pandemic. So in September, it was our highest ridership month since the pandemic. DC region obviously has come out of COVID, I think it's fair to say, slower than a lot of other major urban areas in the country. But you could see that we're now starting to catch up to many of our peers on ridership recovery. So on the top day, we're back into about 450,000 on rail, 400,000 on bus. We've actually crossed 400,000 on bus about 5 times in the last few weeks. In some places, we're actually overcrowded on bus lines and bus routes, especially during peak hours. Combined, about 850,000 people on the system at our busiest days. What's very interesting is, the old way of Metro and transit kind of holistically in the country, but Metro was probably maybe one of the most of this, was very high rush hour service and very low amount of frequency midday, evening, and weekend. And when I lived in D.C. before, it was somewhat frustrating that you know, you would have a great 5-minute frequency at peak hour to move a lot of people, but on the weekends it might be 15, 20 minutes, which really didn't encourage people to use the transit system on things like special events or just, you know, other people that work on the weekend. So we've rebuilt our network to be an all time of day, all day a week network, which is kind of leading around the industry right now. And you'll see it's starting to pay off. On the weekend, bus ridership is above what it was pre-pandemic, and rail ridership is pretty close to what it was. Last weekend was rainy, but the weekend before that we actually exceeded pre-pandemic. During the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are clearly our busiest days. Then it's Friday, then it's Monday. Monday is soft. There's no getting around that. Friday is busier the second part of the day. Seems like people are done Zooming and Teamsing all day and then want to actually get out and see other human beings. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday are definitely really ramping up. We had the highest 8 a.m. hour and the highest 5 p.m. hour in the last 2 weeks. So what that really means is our base customer, our base commuters are growing back, while our special events and other types of business kind of grew. So that gives us a lot of hope that the recovery is going in the right direction. Spring is usually our busiest time of year, so we're ramping up for that. A big topic to get people back on the system, there's no getting around it, is public safety. So you have to run really good, frequent, fast service, which we are running really well. Highest reliability and frequency we've run in years here at Metro. But the region, and I think all over the country, has been dealing with some public safety concerns. So one of the top things I heard from the board and our customers and stakeholders when I got here was, what are we going to do with fare evasion and what are we going to do with public safety concerns? So we've been kind of really going at this topic very hard. We have a great police department led by Chief Anzalo, former one of the top chiefs in D.C., and he's been empowered to get out and take people that are causing harm in the system and get them off the system, period. Our employees should feel safe coming to work every day, and our customers should feel safe using the system every day. You'll see by this quickly slide, enforcement is up 274% year over year. We are going after people that are causing problems in the system. Everyone deserves a safe system to be on. So, you know, arrests are up, summons, citations are up. We are out there every day with our police department. We signed memorandums of understanding with other police departments, including MWA. Jack Potter and MWA are helping us at this station in Dulles as an example, and we put special police officers around. Where we have extra police, crime is actually down 31% where we actually have extra police in the system. And that's really important on fare evasion too. Fare evasion is important. It's a public safety issue, but it's also a financial issue. So we actually increased fare evasion citations by over 1,200% in the last year. And some of those lead to arrest. Most of those mean someone won't comply or they try to assault an officer or do something like that. But generally speaking, we are out there doing point of entry policing. And that's to take weapons off the system. It's to take you know, people with warrants. The idea, again, keeping the system safe for people that need to use the system. So just really proud of the public safety efforts that we've kind of put out in the system. The bottom left-hand corner is a picture of our new fare gates. We had, I think it's fair to say, room for improvement on our fare gate design. And now we've changed out 11 stations already. Every station will be touched. At those stations, we are seeing a reduction between 70 and 90% fare reduction at those stations where we changed out the gates. So all things going in the right direction there. Next up is, let's talk about the, you know, as Board Member Letourneau said, he has the unfortunate role as our finance chair, and I'll double down. It's a, you know, it's a unique financial time in transit. Here at Metro, we have a pretty significant FY25 deficit ahead of us. We did a forecast just at the start of the summer. It was about a $750 million deficit. Very, very significant. Over 70% of our costs are labor, right? We are a people-driven organization. We deliver service. So it really means that we have to impact service significantly to reduce deficits if there's no other way to balance those fundings. Just want to highlight a couple quick things here. We want ridership back. There's no question, and I'm bullish it's all going to be back and one day grow above what it used to be. I can't say that's going to be 4 months or 4 years, but I think we're going in the right direction. That white line represents, dotted line, if we had full ridership recovery, that's all that would eat into the deficit. Because again, we're not a profit entity, right? Just like roads, just like schools, other things, that's not what we are, but ridership revenue makes up a piece. The yellow part is what's really important. As Board Member Letourneau mentioned, we had federal funding that was COVID relief money that made up a big delta for us, and without Congress and multiple administrations, we wouldn't be here today. But the pandemic killed us from ridership and revenue, but historic inflation really impacted this organization, just like it did for all organizations. So 3 drivers that really made up the 750. One, again, I mentioned was inflation. Factually, though, Metro is at or below the regional average for all transportation or government agencies for inflationary growth in the last 5 years. So we are actually not growing any faster than any other government agency or transportation agency on the average in the region. Second, revenue pandemic, as I mentioned, we lost hundreds of millions of dollars in ridership revenue and advertising revenue, things of that nature. And the third is a jurisdictional credit. So the board in early days of the pandemic decided to give a credit back to the jurisdictions because they didn't have line of sight on their funding before municipalities and counties and others got the second tranche of federal relief money. That credit was given to DC, Virginia, and Maryland. And so when you actually take that credit, what it did is it reduced the subsidy that year, and then you compound it across the years since 2020. In totality, that credit is now worth $690 million. So you could actually argue that without the credit, we would actually have a balance, more or less a balanced budget this year. That doesn't mean we wouldn't have next year a funding significant issue, but that's how large that credit is, especially when you add in the compounding. So, like I said, the only real chance we have, if it's based on service, to deal with the deficit is gigantic cuts. 67% of Metro service would need to be cut. A good example of that is if you took the train here to the airport today, like I did, I think it's fair to say you would not want to take the train to the airport because you're going to have a really bad experience. We're talking incredibly reduced service. We're talking laying off over 5,000 employees. Basically decimates the region from a transit point of view. So here are the decisions coming up for the FY25 board. We'll talk very quickly. I know you have a lot on the agenda. One is financial management, how we managed the organization last year. 2, we did a task force to see how much savings we could bring to the organization that don't actually touch service itself. Preventive maintenance, that's a way of using Federal Transit Administration funding for preventive maintenance. There's a little flexibility to use it for operating money. Really horrible thing to do long term. On a short term, lots of agencies do this to get through a crisis, and we certainly have one. And then federal revenue recovery, and that's a nice way of saying we used to get a lot of revenue from federal employees on the system, and we get about half of that now, and we'd like to see the federal government get back to their full contribution that employees contributed. The other things we'll be talking about the board next week, actually, are fares and service, and what kind of targeted service cuts could look like versus draconian service cuts. Even the minor service cuts will be disliked by everyone in the region that they impact, and no one likes fares increased, especially as you're recovering ridership, but it's certainly going to be stuff that's on the table for the board to consider. This is a review of all the savings Metro has had since FY28, a cumulative savings. The $50 million is this new cost efficiency task force that I put together with our CFO and others about 3 or 4 months ago. We now believe we could bring $50 million of reoccurring savings across Metro every year going forward. So that's $600 million of savings over the next 10 years, again, without touching service. So we've kind of flipped every cushion there is, any other analogy you want to use to say what we can get away with at Metro and still run a great organization. If we use the preventive maintenance money, like I mentioned, the federal money, the challenge what we're really doing there is we're using our our $500 million dedicated capital money, and we're using that to still make sure we get the preventive maintenance done, because there's no way we're not doing the preventive maintenance work, to use the FTA preventive maintenance money to cover operating. What that effectively will do, though, is instead of running out of debt capacity, bonding capacity in FY29, that will pull us into FY28. So we'll lose a whole year at minimum of our debt capacity by doing that. If we had to do that 2 years straight, it basically will collapse any new debt capacity in FY26 into 27, the same time this next operating problem kind of kicks in again the following year. So we have a structural issue at Metro that we're going to have to come together as a region and really resolve. So here's a just quick layout. Option A is basically we used to do $60 million a year in preventive maintenance, the FTA money, as I mentioned. Option B, last year we did $199 million, and option C would be using the max. And the max is, it's not just every dollar you get from FTA, it's dollars that are eligible for maintenance. And we think we have up to $345 million currently of preventive maintenance eligible costs. You put all those together, the $50 million of reoccurring costs. Last year, we managed the place well enough to come up with a one-time $95 million savings. I mentioned some inflation and the federal smart trip. That could get our deficit down in the 290 range. Now, fares and some minor service cuts will be considered as well. So we've significantly reduced the opportunity to reduce the deficit for this year, but some of these are kind of one-year solutions. But I think everyone, again, is just trying to figure out a path forward, a more holistic path forward. So the other thing as we wrap up here is talking about the 3% cap. So the 3% cap, obviously before I got here, and whether the 3% is the right number or it should be CPIW, that's kind of a second conversation that should be had long term. But neither here nor there. There is a cap in Maryland and in Virginia related to funding for Metro. And it basically means the base can't go above 3% every year. That law is not in D.C., but they have stuck to that 3% as well. So right now, it is tied to law in Virginia that the base can't go above 3%. So even if, I'll put Director DeBrule on the spot, make it easy, that she won Mega Millions or Powerball the other day and wanted to give us the money, did you win, by the way? No.
I don't think I'd be here.
Okay.
She said something inappropriate, so we muted her mic.
There we go. But the theory is even if the funding was available, that needs to change to allow the funding to even flow. The challenge on that is obviously going to be some timing. Just quickly here, this is the subsidy part that I mentioned before, the $100 plus million credit, and then the $135 million credit, and then it compounds. So again, just want to show how that equals $690 million. And then back to the cap piece. So what we're really struggling with a little bit at Metro is the kind of certainty or clarity around the cap and the funding. So we have our FY25 budget process. The board usually votes on the budget in April. We do a budget briefing in public in September, October, November. October is next week. The general manager proposes a budget in early December. This time we're going to do multiple scenarios. I think the first time in Metro history because we don't really have certainty around the budget right at the moment. The challenge on that is without certainty around the cap and the funding, come January, I'm going to have to implement a hiring freeze and potentially layoff notices. It takes about 6 months to go through the whole layoff process with our union because there's bumping in seniority actions and everything. So to lay people off in July, I have to start that process in January. Of course, the challenge with that is every day that happens that I do a hiring freeze, we attrit at least 50 operating people a month. So those are people that drive a bus or a train, and they're not someone that you take off the street and they do that the next day. They have to be trained and certified. So even if we are going to resolve our funding and our cap, every day that goes by that we don't have that certainty will mean that we will drop trips and really impact customer service potentially for weeks or months until we get that resolution. And that's what this kind of this really does shows, because we also can't apply for our annual federal grant cycle until our budget is approved, and the budget can't be approved until we understand what the jurisdictions are going to do. So timing is kind of the essence that we all get. I would say the word clarity around what the steps in the future are. And this is just another way, I think, of saying the same thing here, but in different terms. So we have a compact. We're the only place like this in the country that has a 3-state federal government kind of solution. We're trying to obviously avoid the cuts, but to do that we need the cap and the kind of certainty around funding. And I mentioned the kind of alignment on different schedule items like that. I think that hits the budget piece that we wanted to go through. Chair, Board Member Turner, anything else that I missed or you want to quickly say?
Yeah, we were going to, So Secretary Miller, I just want to close out by highlighting some of these. And again, Randy has mentioned some of this, and I all want you to know that we have been having several discussions with the general manager and his team, and led by Matt and the Finance Committee, looking at all the different budget scenarios. So again, just so you're aware, to avoid the service cuts, the 3% subsidy cap in Virginia and Maryland will require a one-time adjustment to the baseline in fiscal year 25 to help us get through this period. The budget calendar, the service plan, and the collective bargaining agreements, all the work that goes into that and all that will have to take place does not align well with the jurisdictional legislative calendars. As you know, Virginia, Maryland, and the district all have different calendars, and the timing and some of the things that the general manager and his team will have to enact or put in place. It's a very complicated situation that we'll have to work through. So those alignment challenges, as the general manager said, could cause significant layoffs, hiring and training issues, and staffing reductions will obviously have the significant impacts on the organization, as you might imagine. But I want to take just a quick opportunity to thank Randy. Like I said earlier, Randy has come in and effectively transformed the organization in a year, and I also want to publicly acknowledge the work that Matt does as our finance chair, and he does a great job, and we work really well together. And I want to thank you, Secretary Miller, Director DeBrule, Deputy Secretary Sargent, for the time you have spent with us to really dive into the issues and really understand what it is that we are dealing with here. I appreciate the level of seriousness that you've taken as we approach this. And, I hope we all understand how important Metro is not only to the Commonwealth, but to this region. If there's one thing we learned during the pandemic and when we're meeting with all the various regional leaders, whether it be at the federal level, the state level, or the local level, they all understand and appreciate the importance and the significance of Metro to this region. And it's vital that we work hard to really come up with a solution that's going to work for everyone in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all three of y'all. Do we have any questions?
Secretary.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Merrill.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. In looking at the information you presented this morning, I was struck by your operating capital allocation that seems to be disproportionate capital. Is this because you're catching up? And number two, did I understand your slide that you're going to have a fare modification that will increase the deficit by $65 million?
Well, first of all, I think that's accurate. We had a backlog, a state of good repair backlog, which has really required an intense effort to get the system into a much safer condition. As far as the fare piece, the $65 million, that wouldn't be a negative, which, let me get back to the slide.
Yeah. I'm sorry, sir. Can you clarify the 65? I just want to make sure I understood what
It's on your slide 16. You have a $750 million deficit, which then you have a $95 million reduction because of operating efficiency, but then a 45 going the other way because of revenue enhancement. And the footnote says that's.
Oh, yes, let me explain that. I'm sorry. Obviously, for time, we could go through this for hours. So what that means is our projection of fare revenue is off so far in the first couple months, but we are also seeing better recovery with our fare gates. So we're off by about $65 million, we believe, in overall fare revenue, but we believe about $20 million we're going to recapture with our new gates. So that nets out to about 45. We're hoping that number goes down. Obviously, this is only basically just close to a quarter into the fiscal year with these numbers. So what that really means is all ridership is not monolithic for us. So while we get weekend ridership has recovered, weekend ridership is $2 a fare versus midweek, that same fare to, say, Dulles Airport is $6 from downtown. So we are getting less long-haul midweek trips than we expected. And I think some of that is actually the federal employees that we expected to be back. I mean, a year ago, we were told everyone was coming back to the office. 8 months ago, we were told everyone's coming back to the office, and we just haven't seen a lot of that to the level we expected yet. So we're going to, every month, keep looking at that number, and hopefully it will continue to go down.
So your $750 million deficit did not assume that reduction in volume. The base case did not assume that, since you're adding an additional deficit.
That's right. That's the offset. That's why it's a plus in that category. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes, Ms. Hines.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, early on, I can't remember who said it, when in talking about the jurisdictional credits, we said they were Maryland, Virginia, and the district. In Virginia, are they the state's credit or are they the locality's credit? I always feel like we have to be a little clear as we talk about that.
It was the local government credits.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So in Virginia, we split roughly 50-50 state and local. We gave credits to the local governments because they were, first of all, we weren't providing the level of service that they expected at that time. And then they were uncertain, I can say this as a local government official, what the revenue picture was going to be. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Anybody else? Just a couple, thank you all very much for being here. Really appreciate, and I know you got a lot of hard work and appreciate what y'all been doing. And it's, Randy's been Mr. Clark has been great as he's waded into these issues. Can you help me understand a couple things? One is, if you had to tell me what the increase, the average fare increase has been system-wide across rail in the last 10 years, do you know what that number would be?
Mr. Secretary, I don't have that with me, but we have a slide that I believe Assistant Secretary Sargent got sent. If he did not, I'll make sure he gets that today. But it shows the rail and bus across from 1976 to now. We basically have kept up with inflation on the average rail, the average bus fare. I will say the last couple of years it dipped a little bit. Where we haven't come up to inflation as equal of those is long haul fares. Those are a little off what they would be in real dollars from 1976. But we have that chart, and if you have not received that yet, I'll make sure you get that today.
You know, the state's position has been fairly straightforward. And you've made a comment about certainty in funding. And from the state's perspective, can you help me understand what's not certain about what you're getting from the state in funding today?
I guess the point we made about certainty was certainty around the deficit. So not about the funding levels that are actually already dedicated. It's certainty, I think.
Of how to fix the problem?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the timing and amount is where we're currently, I think, lacking the certainty that we'll all need to avoid the layoffs and the hiring freeze.
Just a couple more things. When we've talked sometimes earlier, and we're engaged with folks from the board's perspective, that obviously we're engaged with WMATA on a daily basis, and Director DeBrule and many of us. But we looked at some admin costs, some administrative professional costs that seem to be out of whack in terms of its growth. Have you gotten any more information on that? I mean, that was just a steep, we don't have that in this slide presentation, but there was a great increase in certain costs in the system over a period of time before you got here. Have you been able to get into that?
Yes, Mr. Secretary. So we have some information that I think Regina may be talking to Mr. Sargent about later today. Plan on getting some information to you hopefully by the end of the week. Team has been diving deep into that. So a short way of getting to the issue is we do not have a significant increase in general administration. We have I would say, a documentation problem at Metro that goes back at least 10 years of how things are classified. So not on the accounting side. People are ledgered correctly. They are being billed correctly to a cost center of capital or operating. There's a specific file used for National Transit Database reporting that is not correct. There's just no way getting around it. Metro needs to be transparent and own that. We're going to show you all the back data files. But a good example is in 2022, I just had a briefing on this yesterday, we had several hundred custodians in facility maintenance allocated to general administration for the National Transit Database file, but in the accounting ledger, they're actually billed correctly. So we definitely have a document control problem on this topic at Metro that we're going to be setting a new kind of quality control procedure in.
Sort of hard to understand when the numbers don't reflect reality.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that.
You know, I will say this, WMATA is obviously critically important in Northern Virginia. It's been here a long time. As you know, they've demonstrated, obviously, in the slide presentation today, sort of what it's all about here. And those of us who spend time here know what it's about. But it's obviously troublesome. The whole compact situation is hard. You know, in Northern Virginia is a hard place because of the regional sense of the place. And you got multiple governments in it. And not only state governments, but local governments, the federal government, and we all sit at the table and try to figure it out together, but we all have different constituencies, and that makes it really hard for these folks and for us. And frankly, I wish it wasn't that way, but I don't know how it couldn't be that way unless we just had a regional government of this area here, and they decided as a group in that sense, and of course that's not going to happen. So we got a lot of work to do. At the end of the day, our vision has been is that WMATA has not operated as well as it should have in some of the more recent past. We think it's on a good footing here going forward. There is not a sort of a silver bullet here in terms of money. I would tell you that it's our belief that our colleagues that we share these expenses with don't have a silver bullet either. And so together we're going to have to find a lot of brass bullets or copper bullets and add them up together, I guess, to get it to a silver bullet. And some of those brass bullets means cost cutting, and it's going to be some service cutting. I mean, I just don't know how to get there on whether the number's 750 or whether it's 500 or whether it's 350 on an annual basis is going to be a choker for the folks that got to come up with the money. So together we're going to work hard at it. I know we'll find a solution. We certainly want to do that, and we'll continue to push and work with you all to get there. It's an important system. We need to find it. I did have one other question that sort of left me a little bit. I don't want to get too deep here, but in the safety, the capital spending curve that was
Slide 6, sir? Is that where you're-
slide 6.
Okay.
You know, we do something in transportation, and we're getting away from it on our bridges where we use this term called structurally deficient. And structurally deficient raises all sorts of hair on the back of your neck if you think about a bridge going over a large body of water, and it's structurally deficient. And it doesn't mean what you think it means, but it's not a good rating either, right? That's right. And so I don't know what all this means, but when I see today we've got $4.5 billion of overdue safety needs, right? And in 2028, we still have $1.5 billion of overdue safety needs. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know when I get on a rail car and I know they got $2 billion of overdue safety needs, it doesn't make me real happy. Nor if I got on that airplane and they told me they were going to have $2 billion of overdue safety needs in the Delta Airlines flight community, I would be unhappy. So I don't know what that means exactly, but obviously a plan that doesn't get rid of overdue safety needs, if it means sort of what I'm thinking it means, is concerning. So can you speak to that? Am I not looking at this right, or is safety not safety?
No, I think, Mr. Secretary, we should all want to make sure all of our assets, just like you would at your house, are functioning to the level that, the functional level of that asset. So whether it's a fridge, TV, or in this, a bridge to the commissioner, or to us, a rail car or bus. So what this really shows is Metro had a very large state of good repair issue, and that's why we had a significant amount of fires, water infiltration, other challenges at the agency. That money has been invested to make things like this platform. If you went to National Airport back in 2016, 2017, this airport platform was actually jacked up with bracing so it didn't collapse. Literally, the concrete on the platform was so corroded it was falling apart. Now this is a structurally good platform that's going to be good for at least another 40 years. Our Yellow Line Tunnel, which we actually completed under budget and ahead of schedule, that project had water coming in from the Potomac that you could actually kick, and part of the steel plating can come in and seep water. That now is fixed. That actually led to the very tragic situation that happened at LaFont Plaza, where a woman died with a smoke incident because of water infiltration of that tunnel. So I could tell you, before this opportunity, I was in Cap Metro in Austin. Before that, I did the national stuff, so I did a lot of safety auditing throughout the world and the United States. And before that, I was the Deputy Chief Operating Officer up in Boston, which is like about the oldest system in the country. We have a really good system right at the moment. Our structures are good, our track is good, our power cabling is good, our signaling is getting a little old that needs to work on. Our rail car age is getting better, but I will say what we're very concerned about, if we do not have the capital funding and we have to use capital for operating, that will probably delay our 8,000 series rail cars, which means we keep our 3,000 series rail cars longer. They're already at 35 to 38 years old. Max life at a rail car is 35 to 40. So these are really old cars that came in the mid-'80s that we have to get off the line. So that's the kind of stuff that's at the end of this chart. So we need to keep that level of investment to keep that number as low as possible. I don't think, in being honest, we're ever going to get to zero. Most organizations always have a little bit because you're constantly working your plan and you never execute perfectly. But we got to keep that number low because that number means state of good repair, which means reliability, which means ultimately a safe system. It doesn't correlate to something like a bridge deficiency. You could drive a truck over that bridge, but eventually that bridge will give. So our system is fundamentally safe. If not, I would shut the system down tomorrow. Wouldn't even think twice about it. But eventually these issues will lead to safety incidents, and eventually people could get hurt with that. So hopefully that gives a little more clarity from I guess, my point of view as the GM on that, sir.
And Secretary Miller, if I could add one thing, I think Mr. Letourneau made reference to this. The capital delivery, we were budgeting for a certain amount, and we weren't delivering on that for a while. We are executing on that fully now. The dedicated funding that you mentioned earlier, that has allowed us, in addition to our normal capital budget, has allowed us to essentially rebuild and replace all the core functions of this system. In a lot of ways, the system has been rebuilt over a number of years. And the team that Metro has in place is really executing and doing an excellent, excellent job. And the capital team, the safety team are working together. And it's just a whole level of operation and execution that Metro has not seen. I guess I could say ever.
Yeah, I would just say this, sir. The capital program, I think Andy Off came down with Director Buell at last meeting. Andy is, I've been around the business my whole career. Andy's probably the best capital delivery person in the United States. So former Colonel, Army Corps, he knows what he's doing, and he is really delivering on this team. So we executed 99% of our capital plan last year. And, considering supply chain and other topics, we delivered really well at the highest level we've ever done as an agency. Again, our concern is if we don't keep a certain level of investment, eventually things kind of, fall apart. So short term, there's a little bit of give that way, but long term, we don't want to go down that path again, for sure.
You gave me a really long answer, but I think what you said was the system is fundamentally safe, or you would shut it down. And the line that says overdue safety needs does not mean it's unsafe. It means there are things that we need to be doing that if we don't do over time will lead to conditions that would be unsafe.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. Just like this runway, just like Commissioner with bridges and roads.
And a lot of that is the rail cars. I mean, as Randy said, we're running 3 old rail cars at this point. We have a plan to replace them. It's expensive, but that's reflected in here.
Yep.
All I'm saying is when you show it like this, the first thing I think of is, oh my, they're telling me they need, where are we, 22. We got $4.3 billion of overdue safety needs. Not overdue needs that will eventually lead to safety problems, but it's like it's current. It's a current safety problem. That's how this slide addresses it.
Yeah, and I would say that's kind of how the industry frames state of good repair.
It's like the structurally deficient bridges.
Exactly, sir. One of the things that I actually am really excited about, what we need to be really doing with our capital program, every dollar we put into capital not only has to make sure our asset is in a good state of good repair from a safety point of view, we should be modernizing our assets to get more cost effectiveness out of the asset. So a good example is we need to improve our signaling system. We do not want to replace that with just the same type of signaling system. We want to go to computer-based train control system, which will eventually allow us to do driverless trains, which you would see in places like, South Korea or other parts of the world. So it's much more cost efficient. So we want to figure out how to use our capital dollars to ultimately drive efficiencies, not just be safer.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Well, thank you all very much for coming and joining with us this morning. You all have lots of hard work ahead of you. We appreciate what you do, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
The next item on the agenda is our Smart Scale Program update. Ms. Brooke Jackson. And
Secretary, is there any possible way we could drop down smart scale discussion until after lunch so we have documents we just got this morning?
I can't hear you.
Any possibility of dropping smart scale down to after lunch so we could read the documents we just got this morning?
We got a timing problem. When did these come out? Just today?
This morning at 9.
Most of it is,
It's all been presented on before.
excuse me?
It's all been presented on before. There's one or two.
So most of this, other than the ED piece, which is what we really need to focus on because of timing, most of this is review. And we can certainly come back to it this afternoon, Mr. Stan, if we need to. We'll go through the review. We'll hear from Mr. Dreiling on the ED stuff. If we need to come back, we'll come back.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, members of the board, my name is Ho Chang with ATCS. You can see the presentation agenda as well as the structure for today's presentation. So we will review the feedback that we received.
Hold on a second.
Yes, sir.
There's a hallway.
All right, Mr. Chang, thank you.
Yes, sir. Today we'll review the feedback that we have received and provide you with additional information to keep moving forward with our work. This slide is familiar to you. This provides the milestones and timeline of our study and how each phase fits together. Since the beginning of the year, starting with the comprehensive stakeholder survey, the CTB has been engaged in a holistic review of Commonwealth's nationally recognized data-driven process for prioritizing multimodal transportation investments. The review is being conducted to determine if Smart Scale is meeting its goal of identifying and funding these transportation projects that provide the greatest benefit for the investment of taxpayer dollars. To date, the review has included 9 regional meetings or hearings and 6 CTB board meetings where engagement of our stakeholders has been actively encouraged and where the project team gained valuable feedback. So I'm going to turn it over to Brooke to go through the next section of the presentation.
Thank you, Ho. Members of the board, Mr. Secretary, good morning. Thank you for having us back again. We are going to spend some of our time revisiting September's material. We got several questions from the board. I brought Michael back. Thankfully, he's able to come up and help address some of these questions. But first, I want to do a quick reminder of where ED, economic development, falls within the smart scale scoring system. There are 6 factors: safety, congestion, accessibility, land use, economic development, and environment. And within those factors, there are several measures. They each have 2 to 3 measures underneath them. Specifically, economic development has 3 measures, and we're going to focus most of this on ED1, a little bit on ED2. I brought the freight impact statement to you guys last month, and Michael's going to focus on the project support for economic development and the improvements that are proposed that were brought by VEDP. The percentages in the factor areas at the top, that is determined by your area type. We go over that frequently with our area type map. As of right now, there are no proposed changes to the area type weightings that we have for area type and factors. And I hand it over to Michael to go through ED1.
Good morning. Pleasure to be with you again. I'll just cover.
Michael, introduce yourself, please.
Yes, Michael Dreiling. I'm the Vice President of Real Estate for Virginia Economic Development Partnership. For those that don't know what we do, we are the state's Economic Development Authority. And about 4, maybe 5 weeks ago, we had a chance to take a look at the smart scale scoring, the ED1 scores, provided a few recommendations, which brought us to present last time. And then, as Brooke explained, we had a couple of questions that came up that we've been working on, have some responses on those. But, as we're going through this, we do want to just revisit some of the recommendations that were made, just to refresh on what those recommendations were and the reason for them. So just to start out, the current ED1 scoring, when we did that assessment, had a few pieces that we thought could be updated to better reflect how we think about economic development. The first one is, as a state, we look at economic development and we have something called our economic development impact model, which essentially assesses the value of real estate as far as economic development opportunity that it represents. So it quantifies jobs and capital investment that real estate can capture in the state. And so with that understanding and standardization that economic development uses, we recommended that be incorporated. And I'll explain further how that's recommended to be incorporated. The second thing that we identified was that there is a manual process when quantifying the economic development impact of smart scale projects, a very manual process that requires applicants to fill out a lot of site data. That process also requires tremendous amount of validation and vetting by staff. It's time consuming and not necessarily accurate based off of the review that we did. So we proposed generally several modernization recommendations. The first of those is really to capture that standardized approach that we use in economic development, the impact assessment model, so to incorporate that into the decision making. The second thing is to use that model to generate and model CapEx and jobs for the real estate that is captured in smart scale. And then the third thing is to assess the value proposition of these sites. Look at really what the market is saying, and have these sites seen looks? Have they seen projects that actually would go and land on the sites, and how competitive are those sites? Or is it really a pipe dream that these sites would land a project in Virginia? So we wanted to capture a few of those things, and we made some recommendations last session on those topics. And I think Brooke's going to talk about the ED2 recommendations.
Just real quick, last month we proposed transitioning from taking the freight impact measure, and the output right now is based on tonnage, but we suggested shifting that to freight volume instead. It was a very minor change. We tested it singularly, and no projects were impacted by the test. And when we go through the presentation a little bit later, you'll see we combined ED1 and ED2 together in our singular individual recommendation. But we do stand by the concept of switching to volume over tonnage because it doesn't add additional value to that measure.
Skipping ahead, and this is all content still that we discussed last session. So this is the recommended new scoring for ED1, and these are the weighted percentages. So if you recall, we had a graphic last time that talked about the radius of sites that get pulled into each smart scale application. So there's a distance, a drive time from each smart scale project that captures sites. So, we would not propose any changes to that radius at this time, but we would recommend that the statewide property database that VDP manages be used to capture those sites instead of those sites being manual entry by each applicant. That database is anyone can enter properties into the database. Our team manages and vets those properties. It's an online database. It's open, and anyone can access it. So it would be a much more automated system and a more automated, standardized way to capture that real estate for each smart scale project. The tiering, we would propose to use the project readiness tiering that is currently standardized by VEDP that captures either a 1 to a 5 tier based on how ready the site is. So this would be used to determine scoring for how ready those sites are that are captured within the radius from the smart scale project. We would do the modeling, as I discussed before, that would capture the economic development opportunity that's presented by those sites. So that's number 2 here. That's the capital investment that would be represented by an industry or a manufacturer landing on those sites, and the number of jobs that those projects would create on that piece of property. The site funding factor is one that we had several questions about, so I think we'll have some further discussion on this. But just to revisit, that is a 15% of the ED1 score, and what it would be capturing is how much funding has been leveraged on these sites as of the application date, which we use as an indicator in economic development to really judge whether other funding sources think that these are competitive sites. Usually when you're capturing state funding, federal funding, local or private funding, that truly means that you have validation that this is really good real estate. So we want to make sure we're capturing that.
Michael, if
yes,
I
sir.
can interject for a second, you said how much funding. It's not how much funding, it's if funding. Is that correct?
So it was previously proposed that this would be a binary or discrete metric. If you've received funding, then you would get the 15% score. I believe there were some comments about that after further discussion. So we had that teed up in one of our subsequent slides that I think there may need to be some discussion on that.
Well, here it says receives the full weight of the funding factor in the recommendations. So it's
Correct.
a 1-0 as it's recommended here. Let me say this, the concept here, and we batted this around a bunch, was not that it made it sort of more likely to happen, it's that it was in alignment with what the Commonwealth already believed, right? We're already investing in this from the Commonwealth's perspective for various reasons, and so this would say we're in alignment with that. It doesn't necessarily say something else. But in any case, continue if you will.
And then just briefly, the last 2 factors here. A site visit factor is something we discussed. You may not think about this as such a vital statistic, but when we're doing competitive projects, most companies are doing a national site search. They might identify 2,000 properties nationally. They shortlist that down to usually about a half a dozen that their executives actually visit. So when you receive a site visit from a company on your property, it means that you are at a level of readiness that you're competitive nationally. So we propose using, we track the site visits on the property. We use this as a metric to explain that this is truly a competitive site because you've seen executives from companies, site selectors come and visit those sites. And then the last one is the site readiness score, which is the tiering that we currently use. This has been a standardized program. Most states have a similar program where you grade the readiness of your site from a tier 1 to a tier 5, just indicating how close that is to being ready to support an industry. So those were the proposed recommendations we had last session. We had, I'll just accelerate here to.
Second, Michael. Mr. Merrill.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Is there any consideration for businesses that seek to expand? Because it looks like this is all new. So is there any factor that warrants consideration by businesses expanding existing business?
Yes, so the database that we have, the Virginia scan is what we call it, captures all property that is available and prepared for, landing projects in Virginia. A lot of times we think about that based off of maybe announcements that we see, and we see new companies coming to Virginia, but the majority of our wins in Virginia are actually Virginia businesses that are expanding. And many, many, many times those expansions are happening on this real estate. So this would capture both, think about it, we've had a huge industrial redomiciling that's happened over the last 5 to 7 years. Those companies are coming back from overseas, so they would land on these properties, but it's also expansion of, core Virginia businesses in our state that are, expanding on an adjacent property or expanding on, in many cases, they will be on one parcel of 10 parcels that are in an industrial park, and so they're expanding to the next parcel, and that would all be captured in our real estate database.
Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir. Mr. Lawson.
Mike, we'll speak a little bit about that. You're talking about in the database. You keep saying that over and over. You're talking about a database that's generated by local EDCs, EDAs, and it's your belief that they're going to capture the site that's next door to an existing hospital, office park, or industrial complex?
Yes.
But what if it's not? How do we get that so that it's scored? And you and I talked about this. How do we... it's a good idea to think that our local EDAs and EDCs have everything comprehensively covered, but the reality is it doesn't. So how do we get the private sector property into this and so that they score well? And then the second piece is, and I think you already talked about one of them, but the definition of economic development needs to be broadened to capture the bulk of real economic development, which is the expansion of existing business and industry, the ones that are coming, the home runs that we love to read about, and also the retention of existing business as well. So the definition, you would agree with me, of economic development is all of the above, correct?
Yes. It has to be all of the above.
Thank you.
I don't think it is broad. You said it needs to be broadened. I think it is broadened.
Actually, I think under the existing definition of smart scale, as it's been explained to me, economic development is that future thing. It's that field that's going to be developed. It's in the comp plan. It's got all these factors.
You're talking about the factors we use now?
Yeah.
Versus the one that have been recommended?
Which is what we need to reinforce, that we recommend all, as I said, the 3 categories of economic development.
I thought you meant what we were considering versus where we were. Mr. Merrill.
Including redevelopment, because there are a lot of vacant strip malls in our region.
Folks, there's no question, all right? Understand this is not going to get perfect, all right? We're just not going to get it perfect. But what we're trying to do is get it the best it can be. And we do not have the ability to create all these systems ourselves. We've got to either rely on applicants to tell us, and then we got to go vet all that data, or we got to have a system that we use that has the best data in it we can get and use that, and that's what the state's using now. And so at the end of the day, I don't think any of this is going to end up perfect, whether it's ED or whether it's any of these scores. But our goal is to get it the very best it can be given what's there and what our resources are. And so right now, we're not happy with where it is because, to Mr. Lawson's point, we don't think it's near as expansive. We don't think it's near as accurate. It's very inefficient. All these people are putting in their own data, and we're trying to catch up to it and vet it. So, yeah, absolutely. Everything that's been said, I think, is 100% on, and we're trying to get there. But we're never going to get perfect, and we're not going to be able to create our own VEDP. So, we'll keep driving in that direction.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Kaspertz.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My concern as I look at this is that we're moving away from an approach that I believe was intended to support and sustain business within the Commonwealth, especially growing businesses, Mr. Lawson has suggested. And I look at some of the terminology that we're using, a focus on sites that will attract growth industries. I guess my concern is that we're moving towards a more speculative approach to how we expend smart scale dollars as it relates to.
Not at all.
How does
100%
that-
disagree.
But please explain, Mr. Secretary. How
What we
would-
have now is speculative. Everything is speculative in terms of what you're speculating is going to happen. By definition, it's all speculative until it happens, right? And so our system right now doesn't capture it as well, we don't think, as a better system. And the question is, what's the better system? So, as I said, we're not going to get this to be perfect because we just don't have the resources and ability to get there. The question is, should we be moving in the direction we're moving in, and what other levers might we be able to pull or data that we could get to get there even better? And I'm all ears for that. But I know what we were doing before is not near as robust as this in terms of new business or expanding business or whatever kind of business.
But, Mr. Secretary, if I could, and I think you put your finger on it, it is speculative the way it's written, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, economic development can be a very much a defined benefit sure thing if we just speak with existing business and industry and ask what they want and need, and then reward it or award it with smart scale. And
I don't know
that's
what that
not
means.
speculative at all. It's a negotiated thing, and use this as a tool to help that.
So how do you see that playing out, Mr. Lawson?
Well, number one, I think we change and broaden our definition of economic development to include all three.
But some said we've done that.
Okay.
Let's forget that. Move on.
And then try to heavily incentivize keeping the first two categories, if I could, which is retention and expansion of existing, because I think what Michael's telling us is it's upwards of 60, 70% of our real growth is from existing.
Are you telling me we're not intending to capture some of that, or is that what you're saying? 'Cause
I'm
that's-
saying the way it exists now, we do not capture that.
Not now. We have a proposal that they're making, so let's address, we know what's wrong with now.
Okay.
If you're talking about the proposal that they're making, let's focus on that and say how we can get that better, because we know we want to be better, right?
Thank you. And again, my emphasis would be on the first two categories, retention, expansion of existing, and be less interested in the speculative. Because if I can capture the 70%, I'm much
With
in a
all
better
due respect,
place.
everything that has not happened is speculative. That's the definition of the word, okay? So if it hasn't happened yet, we're speculating that it's going to. Whether that's an expansion, a new business, whatever it is, it's all speculative by definition of the word because it hasn't occurred yet. We're speculating it's going to happen. We're looking out there and saying, what will happen here? Why will it happen here? And what are the triggers that'll tell us that, and how can we incent that? So you suggested that we should have those things. I 100% agree with you. The questions you're talking about negotiating with people, going out and asking them and negotiating with them, and that is where I broke down and got confused because I don't know how that works. And so I was saying, how do you see that happening? How are we going to take a project that's submitted to Smart Scale and go out and negotiate with somebody as to what the benefits may or may not be in the Smart Scale process? I don't know how you see that happening.
Well, on the front end, an applicant is going to say, if I can see these improvements, then I'll be inclined to expand my business. I'll double the size of my plant.
Who's the applicant?
In that case, they're going to work through Smart Scale. They're going to be working through the district, but it's going to be a business of some kind. A large industrial complex, a hospital, a
So the
commercial
business
facility.
So the business is going to go, or the local entity is going to go talk to the business, right? And they're going to say, what are your expansion plans? Just help me work through this.
And frankly, it's what we do every day. We're looking
Yeah,
to
when I'm
develop and expand, and we negotiate with the localities. We match funds. We do all kinds of things with VDOT and others. And those are the things, as we look at Smart Scale, that I think we ought to incentivize. And frankly, what I'll find is you'll find they're not speculative at all. They're very, very contractual, very certain. And I would suggest that we devote resources to that to retain these folks.
I don't know what it is you want us to do, Mr. Lawson. You're speaking in generalities, and I'm trying to work a system that's going to go and operate.
So I think I can speak to this. So what I think we're talking about is something that can be captured in this. So let me just use an example of an opportunity that just landed in a major expansion that happened in Martinsville at the press glass facility. So you have an existing business park. You have an existing tenant in that business park, a Virginia business, and they just did an expansion on the adjacent parcel next to their current manufacturing facility. So we knew about their potential for growth there, and we've known it for many years that they're a growing business, and we knew that at some point they would need an expansion. There's a I think it's a 60-acre parcel that they ended up expanding into directly next to their industrial facility. That parcel was in Virginia Scan, and it was known, it was planned for. We knew there was capacity in the park. We're developing other parcels in that park as well. So for that existing business, the local economic development community, our team at VDP knew about that growth that was going to be happening. That company, they knew about the parcel that was next door. We knew about it. Infrastructure was in the park. We were planning for that, and that happens fairly frequently. That's another one of those examples of the majority of our opportunities. There are expansions in Virginia. So I think we can capture some of your thoughts and just making sure that real estate, that those potential growth, that expansion would happen on is captured in our database, which in large part it is because we see most of those projects winning on real estate that's in our database. But if they are planning to expand and that property is not in our database, it can easily be added, and it's fundamentally the same practice as what was currently followed, except for it's not a manual on each application. It would be inputted one time into our database, and then every time that it's pulled out for an application, it's already automated in the system. And I think that would capture in large part those existing kind of organic growth projects that that we're talking about, and that would incentivize them to be in Virginia as well, is to have that property adjacent that they could grow on.
I think what I'm struggling with, Mr. Lawson, is you want to get to something that would be preferred, right? If we had absolute knowledge, it'd be great. But this is a system we're going to start in, say, January, February of next year, March of next year. People have already started because they don't know all the rules yet, but they're starting. And so they're talking to people, and the money for this will come in how many years, Ms. Jackson?
6 years.
Wow. From today?
So
7.
Yes.
7. Okay? That's when the money will arrive, in year 7. Okay? So, the reality of tomorrow is not what we're dealing with here. And that's part of the problem with Smart Scale. That's why we've done these other things called TPOF to try to get ahead of that, right? Where we actually know contractually, to your point, as opposed to we see an area that's ripe. We see all the fundamental levers that are there. We know what exists. We know what the activity is. And so this area is ripe, and we think there'll be growth if we do certain things or if we align ourselves so that we support it as it happens. And that's what this is trying to get to. It can't really get to individual projects because they're too far away. And for me to come to you and say, I'm going to expand my business in 8 years or 7 years and help me plan for that today is not how it works, generally speaking. That's not where how they operate. So we're trying to get to more of a global view, and we certainly didn't do that before, by the way, we're trying to get more towards that. But we're trying to look at, say, and just like we do with sites, we go to a place and say, would this site out in the middle of nowhere, would it work for X? And why would it work? And what are the benefits? What are the challenges? And if we had that site ready for development, what's the challenge? What's the chance we think we would get some good project there? So they're doing that all the time, right? That's all going on in the background. This is sort of the same. It just happens to be generally in places that have more people in them. There's more stuff going on, and we're doing the same thing. But to link it to a specific project that's going to happen 7 years from now, maybe, is just really difficult. I don't know how to get there.
Well,
that's what I'm struggling with.
No, I understand. But for me, and I agree, 7 years just seems like an eternity, but it's a messaging thing. And I'll give you an example. We're, I believe, going to approve exit 317, which happens to be a very heavily used industrial interchange. And by doing that, are we going to change things in the next 5 years, 6 years? No, it's going to be year 7 before those folks actually see it. But it is my belief, speaking to economic development, by doing that, we're going to encourage all those industries, and it's significant in that area,
100%.
to stay.
100%.
To stay, because they know something is coming, something's on the horizon. And so let's not lose sight of that.
100%.
And frankly, I would view that, there are other reasons why that ought to be improved, and it will be, but that will be a tool, and if we use the definition, the expanded definition of economic development, to cause the retention, and dare I say it, maybe some of those plants will actually expand there as well.
No question. I just don't know how
Okay.
to factor into the concept or into the scoring mechanism that this plant is going to expand, it's going to have this many jobs. I don't know how to do that 7 years from now. I can't do that. So so we're looking at a place, to your point, to the example you used. We're looking at a place, it's got this activity, it's got this potential, these things are around it, the conditions are ripe. Do we think if we do this that we'll be in alignment with growth, economic development growth there, whether that's expansion, new business, or whatever, or just keeping people that are there? Yes, 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 and yes. It's exactly what we're trying to get to. But to tie it to Joe's tire shop that's going to expand, or Sally's Cupcake Factory, or Shep's, septic service, or whatever it is, it rhymed. I don't know how to do that because it is speculative. It's not under contract. We don't know. It's 7 years from now. So all this stuff we're doing is taking this information and making the best judgment of we can. Is it realistic that this will promote / align with other things that are going on there in economic development? So 100% I agree with you. The definition ought to be broad, 100%. And I think it is. What we want is. But to tie, this is exactly why we were frustrated and asked the GA to give us the TPOF change so that we could do exactly what you're talking about and do it tomorrow or a year from now, not 7 years from now. So we got a little bit of a program to help with the immediate, and this program does not help with the immediate, it helps with the middle term. So I hope we're trying to get there, but we're trying to do exactly what you're saying. I just don't know how to do it specifically to any one place with a bunch of businesses. We're just not equipped to do that.
Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Ms.
Chairman.
Hines.
If I might just ask a question, since Mr. Lawson brought up the exit 317, was it, Mr. Lawson? I presume that's an 81 exit?
Yes, ma'am, sorry.
And that was a smart scale project? Was it a smart scale project?
It is.
Okay, so for those of us who are less involved in the day-to-day, perhaps it might be a useful exercise to look at how the score might have changed in ED. If you look at 317 and we must have scored it one way, what if we scored it this way? That would help us all understand, I think, a little bit better. It's out of the context of all of the other contexts, but just to understand better how this would actually work, it might be useful, because I think it's a great example of a place where, in fact, I think they must have gotten some ED points for that.
Well, to Mr. Stant's point, y'all have not been able to see the presentation, and we apologize for that. Most of it is a lot of it is background or going back over, bringing you back to where you are. But I think if you go through the rest of the slides, you'll see some of that, Ms. Hines. Now, having said that, I think it's very important that we understand, and I keep telling y'all this, do not put an overemphasis of weight on running these things the way we're running them against past projects, because it's not going to be predictive. It's going to give you some sense, and we're doing it, it makes a lot of
I
sense to
appreciate
me.
that.
But let's not fall into that trap of this is how it's gonna be. It's only sort of a big picture view. So, are there any more that we want to talk about this? Yes, sir. Mr. Folks.
Mr. Chairman, could we go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
And so I met with our Bristol District staff concerning these proposed recommendations, and we had two concerns. One, on the buffer, and in rural areas, a 1 mile buffer is meaningless. So we would ask for consideration, at least in rural areas, to expand the buffer for the calculation purposes to 3 miles rather than 1 mile. And then secondly, if you go to the one on the site funding factor, one of the primary funding sources in Southwest Virginia, and I think it's true maybe even in the Stanton and Salem districts, is the Appalachian Regional Commission, ARC. And so we would suggest or recommend that that be added to Go Virginia Tobacco Commission and these other funding sources. I don't think it negatively impacts anybody by adding ARC.
It should be, Mr. Folks, any state program that's funding into those things, I think should be, of that kind, should be in there.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ms. Sellers.
How are we defining capital investment? Is it by the company and into what kind of things?
Yeah, I'll get into some of the sausage making on this one. So the capital investment number that we use is based off of historic project wins that we've seen at equivalent size and geography sites. And it is represented by the investment that company is going to make into the site, including their built assets, so their manufacturing, their office building, but also the value of the equipment, because it's truly the item that localities base their tax revenue off of. So their M&T tax, that's really based off of that capital investment. So it's everything that's built on the site by the company.
And I just want to put this kind of out there too, as data centers are becoming part of the discussion. The investment that large companies are proposing to make into the water and sewer, particularly the water lines, and make sure we kind of capture that. It's a little different, but some of these sites are going to be smaller. They're not going to meet the freight criteria. But when you put in a multi-million-dollar water line, that changes the dynamic for that entire area. So just want to make sure that's in there as well.
So the infrastructure that's built, in close proximity to the site, in most cases, that underground infrastructure is captured in the CapEx number.
Good.
Yep.
Real quick, I'd like to clarify Mr. Folk's question. We do have a buffer analysis that goes up to 3 miles. So it just depends on what type of project you're applying for. Okay. So it's a half mile to 3 miles.
Okay.
Wait. Don't leave it like that. So explain the different kinds of projects that you're asking for and why that affects the 1 mile to 3 mile, please.
We talked about this a little bit last month about the impact related to how far of a search, and we gave that table out. So it's smaller features of a project. So if you're doing a sidewalk or you're doing a signal improvement, those are going to have very small buffers, a half mile. If you're doing larger impact, is what we're calling it, larger impact projects like an interchange improvement, a widening over 2 miles or over a mile long widening, that would get that 3 mile radius. Okay. So it definitely depends on the project type that you're applying for. And if you have one component that is those larger projects that I was mentioning, it makes your whole project eligible for that buffer. It's not every little component has different buffers. Does that make sense?
Helpful, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Secretary.
Secretary.
In your data collection, is there a measure or a mapping of job density within the Commonwealth as one of the identifiable data points that you use? In the context of Mr. Lawson's comments about existing business, it would seem that if we looked at our most dense job areas, we'd have some indication of where we might need infrastructure improvements based on the fact that most of our new jobs come from existing businesses. Is that something that you look at or can look at in this process?
We can. We would need to think about how to incorporate that. That would probably be. I don't know if you have a suggestion of how we would incorporate that, but we could look into it.
I think it should be a weighting factor, and I would compare and contrast that, not to pick advantaged and disadvantaged areas, but there could be sites in this rating hierarchy that rate very highly on their readiness and the amount of infrastructure that's already been incorporated within them. And they could have a very low job density in the current environment, the site being developed with the expectation of a new major industry coming to that site. If that were one option, and the other option were to support and sustain existing high-density job areas, I would choose the latter. So how do we differentiate?
Yeah.
And again, that might draw us closer to accomplishing this mission of making sure that our primary job generators, our existing businesses, are being considered based simply on job densities that we have around the Commonwealth.
Job density, Mr. Gasperitz, are you saying there's a correlation between job density and what?
A job density and potential for additional job growth, A,
Yes.
and requirement for additional infrastructure to support that additional job growth. And that occurs not only job, but freight inbound and outbound as well. So
I'm not sure I understand the correlation that you're trying to get to, but
well,
I mean, the fact that you have jobs, the fact that you're in a dense area, right?
dense job area.
Which I would tell you, in most of the state, a dense job area is equally correlated to a dense area. I don't think we have deserts of density where there are no jobs in large areas. I don't think we have that. But I would say there's a correlation there, I would bet. But I'm not sure what we're trying to hang on to.
I guess, go ahead.
Yeah, I
Please.
think I understand what you're saying.
Thank you.
We will take a look at it because it is truly, workforce is one of the mega trends in economic development. So where you have, existing jobs and an existing demonstration that you can supply workforce, it is a competitive advantage, certainly.
Thank you.
So we can look at how to incorporate that. I would just bring your attention to a couple of things. So I know for certain several of the state funding programs have a requirement for you to demonstrate how workforce would be addressed in order to be competitive for those programs. So it's in part captured in number 3 on here. And then you will not get a site visit from a site selector or a company unless you have already demonstrated your ability to address workforce. So the site visit factor in small part, both 3 and 4 would calculate a portion of that job density and your ability to address a company's need for workforce, which I think ultimately is what I think you're getting at with that question. So
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what I was struggling with, Mr. Kasperitz, is that job density is the same as workforce capacity.
I'm not certain, Mr. Secretary.
That's what I'm struggling with, Mr. Merrill.
And Mr. Secretary, so I heard a presentation by your boss, Jason, about on Virginia economic development. And I think to Mr. Casper's points, transportation needs are going to be impacted by job and economic development. And we're talking about knowledge-based jobs, that's going to be congestion. Technology, software, accounting, law, things like this, that's going to be congestion issue. Versus ag business and logistics, which are two of the other primary areas of growth, according to what Jason presented at VEDP, that's going to be transportation logistics, trucking, rail, access to agricultural products. So I do think job density relates to how we will prioritize projects in different parts of the state. You're not going to have ag business and a lot of warehousing in Fairfax County or in Arlington because the real estate's just too expensive. It's going to be knowledge-based.
It is a large factor. I would say there are several mega trends with decision-making that relate to companies. So it is workforce, it's site readiness, it's a lot the cost of that workforce. That's a huge factor, as we heard today from Metro. The cost, and cost of living considerations are substantial for the workforce. So you might have density in some areas, but it is not compatible with a certain, growth industry that's happening just because of the cost of living and what you'd have to pay those workers. So it is a indicator.
At the end of the day, what we're trying to get to, let's make sure we're all on the same page here, is if we do this project, whatever project we're talking about, does it, Dr. Smoot, you're next, I apologize.
Okay.
Does it have a component of it that drives growth, right? Is it likely to drive growth? That's what all this is getting at. Is it
Or
li-
sustains growth.
Either one.
Job density
Does
metric.
it have an economic development benefit? Whether it's retaining jobs, whether it's driving new jobs of new people or existing businesses. That's what this is trying to get at. Does it line up in a way that does that? If I build I was thinking about my time in the Middle East because of everything that's going on, and it's amazing how much like sand there is, like with nothing, right? And if I was going to just, go out into the middle of nowhere and build a road and say, I'm going to build this development, you might say, have you lost your mind? Because there's nothing there and there's nobody there and nobody wants to go there. And that's the extreme, right? And then the other extreme is something that's begging for somebody to come do something with, and we don't have the infrastructure around it and we don't have what we need to make it happen. This is what that's trying to get at. And it's going to be clunky, guys, ladies. It's not going to be perfect. It's just not. The question is, how perfect can we get it? And is it better than what we had before? And that's what we're trying to drive towards. So I'm not wedded to anything that'll get us a better definition. But remember, we're not running economic development for the state of Virginia. That's not our job. And we can only do so much in terms of building our own systems and our own databases and our own mechanisms, and we only have so many resources. So what we're trying to do is rely on somebody else that's the experts for the state who do this all day long, every day, and we're trying to get them to take their system and help us make our system better. And so and this is a good, we should not be pushing on them to look at this, look at that. That's a good thing. But at the end of the day, we got to have something to use, and it can't be hire a bunch of more people and go sit down and negotiate and do this and do that. It's just not going to happen. And so what's the best measures out there that we can find that are going to most closely suggest to us, is this a project that's going to have an economic impact, positive economic impact, whether that's not losing something or whether that's gaining something or not. And that's all we're trying to get to here, right? Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. Ms. Sellers' comment about data centers led me to reflect that many data centers have considerable capital investment and relatively few jobs. So I think perhaps at least we should think about giving more consideration, additional consideration to jobs and less consideration to capital investments, because we do not need to build highways to places where not many people are going to work, although it's a large capital investment. So I just raise that as a
I think
concern.
I'd say this, Dr. Smoot. If Supervisor Letourneau was here, he would like to probably speak to that. Northern Virginia has been the beneficiary, the Northern Virginia area generally, has been a beneficiary of data centers. And a lot of people absolutely love them. And the reason they love them is for the reasons that you said. There's a huge capital investment, and it doesn't require any services. There are no school services, there's no fire, there's no this, there's no that. They just don't have a lot of services because they don't have a lot of jobs. What they do have is machinery and tool or personal property or whatever it is that's generating this gazillions of dollars that's flowing into the local coffers, which reduce everybody else's tax requirements. And so they're sort of like, and yeah, some people don't like them. There's a low hum, and there's this, and there's that, and there's something else, and I get all that. But they're huge generators of economic opportunity for Virginia. They do not create a lot of direct jobs, but they create a lot of indirect jobs, and they create a ton of revenue flow to the localities. And I would tell you that any rural county in Virginia should want to have a data center because it would change their world. I mean, people going after casinos and this and that and everything else, these things generate incredible cash flows to the localities. So, having said that, is that value?
Secretary, I agree that I think you're right on target. However, we are a transportation organization. And if the data center is not going to have a significant impact on transportation needs, then I don't know why we would put money into it.
If they needed a road to get to a piece of land to build a data center, and the Commonwealth got a 28-to-1 return on that investment, that's why we would do it. That's why we would do it. And so that's the point, you know. Is that a good use of money?
May not be a good use of transportation money. It may be an excellent use of other money.
Well, we can have that debate about a lot of things, can't we? Yes, Ms. Ellers.
Just to kind of clarify, it's not the infrastructure to support the data center, but what we're not seeing is a data center by itself. We're seeing a water line get run, particularly in rural or growing areas, and then things want to connect to that water line. Now all of a sudden you have, if you go out into Loudoun County, you see data centers, but you also see everything else that's around the data centers, including apartment complexes and housing developments. Topgolf is right there by it. You know, you see all this industry that comes around it, and so the data center in and of itself may not generate a lot of jobs, but it's going to put in the capital infrastructure like a water line, like electricity, and the things that allow it to now change the entire dynamic of that area. So that's why I would actually argue the opposite. In some cases, in some areas, the capital investment is as lucrative to the Commonwealth and to local jurisdictions as the job creations, in my opinion. And that's what we're seeing throughout the Fredericksburg region, is a lot of data center interest and the things that come with that.
All right, anyone else? Please continue, Michael. We're on slide 7, right?
We will, yes. Slide 7. Well, we had 3 questions last session, and I will go through quick responses on these questions. However, if there's still further discussion needs to happen, please interrupt me, and we can spend more time on them. So the question was around the available tiered properties in Virginia Scan. And so we simply just gave you some statistics on the properties that are in Virginia Scan, their acreage, you see on the right side of your slide, and the tiering of those properties.
Yeah, the question at the last meeting is what do our available sites look like, and how big are they, and what category they're in. So this is a report on that.
Exactly. And then for those that just are curious about the tiering system and how we grade our sites, there's a definition of that on the left side of the page. If there are no further questions, we'll keep moving. The second question is, what is the demand for these properties? And so we provided a summary for you on the left side. This is the acreage and the number of projects for the various categories of acreage. On the right-hand side, we wanted to explain the percentage of capital investment and jobs that each of those acreage brackets represents. And I'll just highlight one trend here. You know, the large sites are vitally important for us. And last year was sort of a staggering year when it came to this. So if you just look at the 500 to 1,000 plus acre sites, that represents close to 69% of the capital investment for the opportunities that we're looking to expand and move to Virginia. So tremendous amount of capital expansion is happening on those larger sites. However, the pure number of opportunities that we saw really is on that less than 100-acre site. As you see on the left bar here, we saw 131 opportunities looking to expand or move to Virginia that wanted property that was under 100 acres. So there were some questions and I think more just curiosity about that last time. So any questions on that one? And lastly,
Michael, you don't have to ask for questions. They'll ask them when they're ready. Just move.
certainly. Last question here. We did have, and we've had discussion about this today. So, can private, local, federal funding be added to the scoring criteria? And there's obviously some pros and cons of this. The state funding sources are currently tracked. There's a repository of those. We keep track of that information. Obviously, we're a state entity. However, the private funding, the local funding, federal funding, there's not a central repository of that. So once again, you're going to have a manual entry of those data points. They could be entered by the applicant into Virginia Scan as a field. They could be entered into the application as a field, but somebody would have to vet that. So I know there were some thoughts about that, and I don't know if there's further discussion we need to have on that, Secretary, but those were some of the thoughts we had just in response to the question.
Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Hines.
Just to follow up, I know why you're calling out the 3 places that you're calling out, but I'm thinking about our rail, the program we do where we put a spur in. So we
Industrial access, real
Thank you.
industrial
I
access.
couldn't remember the right term. So the Real Industrial Access Program potentially could have provided, an improved spur to a location that now might be able to be used by the next door over property as well. Would that qualify? Are we better off basically saying state funding demonstrates a state priority? So it doesn't matter who; it's just state funding. Are we better off saying that?
Well, I don't know how broad state funding is, Ms. Hines, to your point. I was trying to go there without using something that broad. And rail industrial access makes some sense to me, I think, maybe.
Anyway,
Let's explore that a little bit. I hate to use the word state funding because I don't know what's in that I wouldn't like. I hear you. Certainly, I like what you're saying. I just don't know.
It follows on what Mr. Folks said about the Appalachian Regional Commission too. There could be a variety of things.
Yeah, so we should explore that and see if there are other like entities that.
It could be MVTA or CVTA or HR TAC too that makes an investment that all of a sudden, somebody else can take advantage of. And if that's the point, to show that people believe
now you've
in
gone
this.
to regional monies.
Well, right,
or
but
local monies.
Exactly. Well, local seems unlikely to me, but regional does not. But anyway, I just think the point is, and Michael may have said this, people believe in this site already.
Yeah.
People, government entities believe in this site.
Got it. Good point. Please.
All right, we'll keep moving here. If there are no other questions on those, we did just want to outline a couple of things. When we did the evaluation of all of the applications, there were a couple trends that came out of why sites received or projects received an increase in the ED score and why they saw a decrease. So these are summarized here. The general reasons that sites received an increase or projects received an increase was due to really capturing all of the properties that were around those potential projects. We saw a lot of applications that didn't fully capture the best properties that were around them. And so that was more just a function of it being a manual entry, and the applicants simply didn't know about the properties, so they didn't enter them. Virginia Scan.
And let me say this. It gets a little bit to Mr. Folks' question, but it also gets to the point of we're trying to use something that is more robust than what we have access to today. And so we're trying to get a better answer. We're trying to make sure that it's not dependent on the locality that puts the information in that may not be complete. And then we review it and we don't know that it's not complete either. We just vet it for what it is. And or we find out it's not complete. And we go through this difficult back and forth process. And what we're trying to do is help these people get a better application and get more accurate information. That's what we're trying to do. And so your point about putting it in themselves or putting it in Virginia Scan, I'm off topic here, but I would think we'd want to force them almost to put it in Virginia Scan, put it in the central repository so that it's there and we can use it. But just continue, please.
And then just a couple of the reasons that we saw decreases in score. I think there's just a lot of information in the applications, and so there's data validation that has to happen. When we look through the ones that received a decrease in score, they really may have overemphasized certain properties that were captured in the application. And when we looked at those properties, they really didn't represent economic development projects. And so, or those properties may not have been listed in Virginia Scan. There were a couple just data validation things where they had listed a property, but it hadn't been listed in Virginia Scan yet for whatever reason. So there were several that hit that requirement there, and that was a general trend. But a lot of it did come down to properties just not being in Virginia Scan or properties being in Virginia Scan that weren't captured in the application. And that goes back to the automated process that we want to implement here and just having it be more modernized versus it being a very manual entry. You want to cover the ED2?
ED2?
Yeah, like I mentioned in the earlier slide, we did test ED2 individually, did not see a shift in projects, but we do have the results that I'm going to go over here for your review. Ultimately, we tested the economic development methodology that's proposed, and on a statewide level, out of the 394 applications that we tested, 12 projects were added and 9 projects were removed from that analysis. That doesn't mean that project scores didn't increase, and you'll be able to see that when you look at the results that I'm going to cover. So on a statewide level, you have seen this table. We brought this to you guys last month. With individual impacts and cumulative impacts of the scenarios that we've run. And like I mentioned, on a statewide level, it adds 12 projects, removes 9 projects. Individually, every amount of projects that are added or removed are summarized on a statewide level here. I think our time is better spent on the actual district sheet. So on a district level, we prepared these sheets that we did last month. This is to Ms. Hines' question of actually seeing how the economic development impacts on an individual level. What you see here is an example of one district. We have prepared each of the 9 districts plus the statewide project. Apologies that it's small on the screen, but you are going to be able to download the PDFs. It's going to be with the presentation on the CTB website. Everyone will have access to that. It will be publicly available. And I'm going to walk through the top project that you see there. And again, all 394 applications were tested. I know I got that question several times, that I think since it only shows projects that are coming in and coming out, that the assumption was that we didn't test all projects, but we definitely did. And what I mean by that is if a project was funded the entire time by any individual impact or cumulative impact, it would not be listed on the district sheet. If it was unfunded the entire time, it would not be listed on the district sheet here. And that is just to keep it manageable for review so that you're not reviewing 400 projects. So from the top here, I'm going to take you through each column. So this project is in Lynchburg, and you can tell the principal improvement is the gray shaded column. It is a highway project, and the secondary improvement is none. It's important to reference multiple secondary improvements would be listed there. If you had multimodal project, that's where it would be listed. The next columns, DGP and HPP, list whether or not which program it was eligible for in round 5. So this is not any new information. This is the application information from round 5. Then it's the total cost of the project and the total request of smart scale dollars of the project. In the next column, the official round 5 staff scenario results. This clarifies whether or not it was recommended for funding in the staff recommended scenario in January. And if it was recommended for funding, what program it was recommended to be funded out of. And I think that's important as we carry through these definitions throughout. The The first scenario on an individual basis, as in we only would make this change and all other rules would apply. And I think I also need to clarify that, of course, this is illustrative. I think the Secretary mentioned that all of these are under Round 5 rules. Projects are not getting unfunded as a result of this either. This is completely an example. In scenario A, our first recommendation was to refine the high priority programs definition and to put more emphasis on what type of project that you're doing. And I'm going to cover what the specific definitions are a little bit later. But
So let me be clear here. The scenarios A, B, C, D, and E are all, or excuse me, F, are all individual. It just says if we only change that one thing, this is how it would affect that. So in scenario A, if we just changed the definition of HPP and nothing else, that's what the effect would be. In scenario B, if we just eliminated step 2, nothing else, not the HPP, not the future congestion, just that one, that's how it impacts. And as we get across to the end, you'll see when you add them together, those are the impacts, to be clear.
thank you.
Secretary.
Yes,
So on the
Mr.
first
Merrill.
project, Brooke, the fact that that has 2 blank cells means it was not recommended for funding from either category.
Thank you. Yes.
So if you just keep going across, Brooke, I'm sorry.
I do want
Ms.
to make
Jackson.
mention in scenario A, we added a column that wasn't present last time we made this presentation, and it's HPP eligible ? That is letting you know whether or not it would be eligible underneath these new rules. I think was asked multiple times, well, is it even eligible? Just because it wasn't recommended for funding, I do want to know if my project would be eligible under these new rules, and that's what that column says. As one other statement is in scenario A and B, the smart scale score does not change. These are funding rules. These are definition rules. It does not change your smart scale score. As we get into scenario C and D, that does impact your smart scale score. And of course, scenario F does as well with the new economic development improvements. So what I will mention is, starting with scenario C, it says that it stays out, but the change in rank was a positive 10. So while it did not get recommended for funding under the future congestion scenario, it did have a positive impact on that score overall. You can take that away from this. And then in scenario D, making the land use improvement, and again, we'll go through these definitions in a little bit more detail in the later part of the presentation. This particular project was added. Again, it was not funded in the round 5 recommendation, was added to the funding scenario due to the land use multiplier, and the rank changed 84. In scenario F, another positive impact. If we had only done the economic development changes here.
Can I stop for a second? The land use multiplier, when I looked at this sort of, I didn't understand it. And I was surprised it was added. And the reason it was added was sort of the reverse, meaning there were a lot of projects that were ahead of it that made it only on land use. And when you eliminated those projects, all of a sudden this one jumped up because they'd been eliminated. And so it wasn't because of their land use score, it was because of the other land use scores of all the other projects that had been included. And once that went away, then when you took those away from those other projects, this project popped up and said, this is now more worthy. Does that make sense to everybody? So it confused me when I first saw it, because I expected it for land use to be driven down, not up. But it was driving everybody else down, so this one just popped in. Thank you.
I think we covered scenario F. Scenario E is the results that you saw in September. So this is for comparison purposes only to have scenario E. It is the culmination of scenario A, B, C, and D, so that you can see if on the whole, when everything is added together, if economic development completely changed the total outcome from our last recommendations we brought in September. So that is shown in scenario G. The very last 3 columns is the culmination of A, B, C, D, and F. And every district is reported on, and you will be able to dig into that shortly.
Secretary?
Yes, sir, Mr.
And
Merrill.
just could you clarify the change in rank, what the negative and positive means? Is that their new ranking, or it had a 78, or had a 78% 78 ordinal change position?
The second, Mr. Merrill.
So it went up 78.
So in the first project, where we scan across and we get to future congestion in scenario A, top line, it says -10. Does that mean that it ranked 10 slots lower than it had ranked before?
That's correct.
And so as you keep going across, and with land use as a multiplier, it says change in rank 84. Does that mean it went up 84 slots to where it improved of the 394, whatever the total number was, it improved 84 slots up? Correct?
Yes, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Merrill? Okay, thank you. Hi, Ms. Jackson.
All right, I will move on. So switching topics a little bit about some unfinished business from September that we are bringing back to the board is the mid-level application analysis. It's a result of locality requests via multiple letters, and we've also had requests about the difficulty of the application limit reduction. I brought this to you guys in May for our CTB recommendations that came in May, and it was focused on improving readiness and the success rate overall of applications. And just to reiterate what we brought to you in May and why this was important, the application limit, and I'm going to layer on the mid-tier along with that here. But in round 5, we received 413 full applications, 394 were scored, and there were 152 applications that were recommended for funding. And that was a 37% success rate. So what we found there was that time and effort on document preparation, on applications that were ultimately not funded at a 37% success rate. Another thing was more applications is not an indicator of success. If you have the 10 slots, it doesn't mean that your success rate improves by putting in 10 versus 5. Scenario also indicated that the reduction in applications would raise the success rate from 37% to 53%. So application development on the applicant side and on the state side would be better served to applications that actually get to the funding status. Again, we received many feedback on this recommendation from multiple entities stating concern about the proposed limit in the reduction, and we also had a suggestion of adding a third tier. So what does that look like?
Before you go off this slide, the thing that gives me the most headache on this slide is the second bullet, which is 50% are not ready for scoring at the full app time frame, and 90% are not ready to pre-app. I don't know exactly what the 90% at pre-app means, meaning what that creates, but 50% at the full submission are not ready to be scored is a problem. And we got to find a way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be just this way, but we got to find a way to not be getting stuff that's not ready to go. And you know, this is not about effectiveness here, folks. This is about efficiency. And effectiveness for me is first, but efficiency is really important because we're wasting a lot of time and a lot of money, and we're burning people up. And so the question is, can we get the same result, or even a better result, if you will, in terms of the effectiveness of what we're doing while being more efficient? And that's what we're trying to get at here. So there's going to be sort of a midpoint to look at as well as we go forward. But that's the reality of all this stuff that we're talking about. When Mr. Dreiling was talking about, all this stuff's put in by hand. It's all got to be vetted. It's, you know, it's a very laborsome process. And we're trying not only to get a better process, it's more effective, but one that just is going to work a lot quicker and a lot easier and not spend so much time. So she'll continue through this, but that's the intent here. It's not to cut people off, it's just to get more efficient. Mr. Merrill.
Mr. Secretary, thank you. I share your concern about the fact that 50% are not ready and 90%, but I do have to ask the question, maybe the application's too complicated. If 90% of high school students couldn't complete a common application for college, I'd say maybe we have a wrong application for college application.
I might say you didn't have them prepared very well, because I didn't have any problem preparing mine.
You're top 10%, so congratulations.
But in any case,
But aren't, and could you describe the process? I thought before the application went to Central District, they went through the 9 districts. So if that's true, we have a problem at a district level understanding the application.
I will say there is a difference of district support across the state that varies based on how much support the locality or applicant needs. And we rise and meet to that. And I think that is a lot of the problem is back to round 1 and the commitment to make applications ready, that you wouldn't necessarily need a consultant to get it ready. And I think we have been delivering on making sure that these applications get there. It's just the amount of time that takes to do that from start to finish. I will say other feedback that I have received is that there is political pressure to meet the cap in a lot of localities, even well knowing that an application isn't ready to be submitted at that point. They might not be sure what they want the scope to be at that point. They do want VDOT support in helping and picking what the scope should be. And those are things that take time. And to develop a complete estimate to fully fund a project takes a long time when you don't know what you're even doing on the scope level. So the push and pull between the political pressures from localities, and each board wants to have an application that covers their district if you're a local board member, causes projects to be submitted ahead of priorities.
I appreciate that, but I just have to push back. It seems to me that we should have the character to say no if a district has not completed their application, say it's not ready, as opposed to appeasing the district to win political points.
so I think you're well heard. You know, there's a balance here somewhere, I guess. To Ms. Jackson's point, we're trying to help as much as we can help to get as many people at the trough as we can that are ready to go. But we obviously have a problem here, Mr. Merrill. And, you know, if we took the position, which I would not advocate for today, we're not going to take it. But if it gets to us and it's not ready, it gets sent back and call me in 2 years, that would be pretty tough for 50% of our applications. And so I don't think we want to do that. I think what we want to do is find a way to get good applications. And some of that is being addressed by just the push to fill the pot, put as many asks as you can. And some of it is just they're not as well resourced at various places to do this. And so we're trying to find a balance.
Mr. Secretary?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hines.
Brooke, I seem to remember from an earlier presentation when we talked about this particular topic that you all are proposing a number of changes actually in the portal that will likely flag to a locality that they don't have the right data, right?
Yeah.
That they've not filed the proper report, it hasn't received the proper review. So there's a piece of me that says if we really go forward and implement those changes as you all have recommended, which I do support, that maybe the issue is less about the number because people are going to be being kicked out.
Yeah, we're trying to do
yeah.
that. And, you know, I filled out a form, Ms. Hines, the other day, and it wouldn't let me go to the next level until I did what it made me do.
Exactly right.
And one of them was asking for my supervisor's telephone number. I decided that wasn't going to be a good idea, so I didn't put it in there, but I had to work around it because it demanded that I give it to them, and I wasn't going to do it. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
And I
the
would,
same thing with this ED thing. We're trying to get it so that it's a system-based approach, and it's not so manual and so people-intensive. So I 100% agree with you.
right, so I guess part of the reason I bring this up now is, you know, I've lived in the political side of this too, where, you know, people really want to have a project in their district. But for me, the process change is the first step. Let's see what happens with the process change. And then, you know, we'll look at it, you guys will, I won't be here, but you'll look at it 2 years from now after round 6, and then you can say, well, you know what, did that work or not? And if it didn't work, come on back and drop the numbers.
Well, let's get through some more of the proposal here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so on this slide, the top 2 rows represent what the existing rules are, not what we have proposed yet. The current limits are 4 and 10, depending on your size of being locality or a PDC, MPO, or transit agency at 4 and 10. When we came to y'all in May, we recommended 2 options. Option 1 was reducing that limit to 3 and 6, and option 2 was reducing that limit to 2 and 5. We did ultimately make that our staff recommendation at 2 and 5 in May. With the comments against the limit and also looking at expanding this mid-tier to 3 separate categories, we currently are looking at the concept of option 1 with a blend of a 3rd tier.
Let me jump in here, Ms. Jackson. There was a concern that the staff addressed that there were really more naturally sort of 3 groups of entities, and that by only having 2 groups, we're sort of forcing them into a bucket they didn't belong in. And so the suggestion, I think it may have come up at a board member at a board meeting, from a board member at a meeting, was to look at a additional area. And so you can see, instead of just having 2 tiers, which are in the top part of the slide, when you get to option 3, there's 3 tiers of size of area, and that's what Ms. Jackson's going to address now.
And we
It's
still
another way to look at it, another option.
We still think it's important to reduce the limit, but acknowledge that there could be a middle ground that's helpful for us to see how this goes this round, and keep an open mind in the future rounds of adjusting if necessary, and always thinking we can revisit this. But currently, just to reiterate, the recommendation now would be to have 3 tiers at 3, 4, and 6.
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Hines.
So I want to flag an issue here, because over 200,000 puts a lot of my very large counties, and even Arlington County that we're sitting in now is over 200,000 in population. Leaving Arlington out of this, if you look at Fairfax, at Loudoun, and at Prince William, all 3 of them have a significant number of towns whose only access to smart scale is through applications that their county puts in. And so I do think we have to have some flexibility there. It's kind of impossible to me to think about only six applications for Fairfax County when you add their towns in, or Loudoun County when you add their towns in. And so, and I know we've gotten a letter from another area of the state where they are also concerned about how town applications will be handled. So I really want to flag that. I think this 3rd tier is a good idea, but I would just point out that we've got localities who are so far over 200,000 where we're saying, you just get 6 and deal with your towns, and that to me does not seem like a reasonable approach.
Jackson, continue.
Mr. Secretary?
Oh, yes, sir. Mr. Merrill.
Yeah, I would just echo what Ms. Hines just said, because at least in Shenandoah County, Rockingham County, they submit on behalf of 4 or 5 towns. So it's not just in the urban area that has that problem.
It's
If we were to add the 3rd tier, as mentioned, out of the 254 potential applicants, a middle 3rd tier would impact 15 entities. So this would add an additional 15 applications to that proposed 3 and 6, with these entities having 4 applications versus 3.
Mr. Secretary.
Dr. Smoot.
Brooke, give us a little background here. Let's go down the counties column a bit. Brunswick County. Does this imply that Brunswick County has over 100,000 population?
Yes.
Where'd you get that information?
Census data. census.
From census
2020.
data, not the center at the University of Virginia that does the annual
It's
population
the
analysis.
2020 census data.
So, okay.
No.
Thank you.
Were we talking about Brunswick County?
That can't be right.
It's no way Brunswick County has over 100,000 people.
It's not even
Maybe
close.
we'll check that.
Exactly.
It might be 15,000.
Yeah, maybe it's.
So something's wrong here.
Something's wrong with that one. Okay. I'll check that.
Take a look at Montgomery County because it is teetering right at the 100,000.
I have that as right on the bubble. And the 2020 census, it was 99,721.
Yeah, and more recent data, at least from the University of Virginia Center, put it over the bubble, but we'll see, I guess.
Right, and that's a
Something we can
question.
look at.
Should we use the Virginia data because they do update it, every 2 years, right?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
keep it more current.
That's absolutely a change we can make when we review
So what
this
happened to
ahead
Brunt?
of
Well, how
the
did
warrant.
Brunt, is it supposed to be somebody else, or did we just make a mayor?
That is one.
Brunswick, North Carolina.
We just annexed. I'm sure my colleague in North Carolina will be happy to know we're going to take care of their roads down there for them.
I will absolutely revise this. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Smoot.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's have another look at that when it is updated.
Take Brunswick off. Let's update that.
So this line is a summary of all the staff recommendations that we have brought to you over the past month since May when we started bringing recommendations. These are the particular recommendations related to scoring and funding. We kind of jumped ahead and talked about that when we were going through the scoring sheet here, but just to reiterate what scenario A was clarifying the high priority program, projects program definition. Our next recommendation is to eliminate step 2. The recommendation after that is calculating congestion benefits in the future for 10 years, then modify land use factor to a multiplier of all other factor areas, and modify the factor weightings. And we're going to get into a little more detail there before I move on, and then utilize forward-looking economic development factor, which was developed by VEDP. So a quick deep dive into each one of these. I know we've had several discussions around refining HPP eligibility. As the Code of Virginia states, it defines the where high priority projects mean those projects of regional or statewide significance, such as projects that reduce congestion or increase safety, accessibility, environmental quality, or economic development. And then the where is defined as the corridors of statewide significance and regional networks. So the projects have to be located on those two. What we are recommending is refining the definition to include what type of projects. And those include the following feature types: new capacity highway, managed lanes, new or improved interchanges, new or improved passenger rail connections or service, freight rail improvements, high capacity or fixed guideway transit, and transit transfer stations and new bridge. And just as a reminder, the purpose is to ensure HPP projects are of statewide or regional significance. And I'm going to give some examples on the next slide that highlight projects that were funded in round 5 with high priority dollars, but are not of statewide and regional.
Hold on, Ms. Jackson, Mr.
Brooke,
Casper.
before we leave that page, so on the recommended refining of the definitions, I don't see operational improvements as a specific category. And I wonder if it shouldn't be, given the nature of our charge in VTrans to look at operational improvements first before we conduct any of the items that are currently listed under HPP. Should that be listed as a discrete category under the new definition of HPP? Or why wouldn't it be, I guess?
Give me an example of an operational improvement that you think should be in.
It could be innovative intersections, innovative signal systems, spot safety improvements along a corridor, any number of things that would improve corridor throughput.
I'm not sure that, Some of those might, some of those might not, in my
Well,
view.
I think comprehensively, operational improvements is something perhaps the commissioner could best speak to from a comprehensive nature, but it is a discrete category, and it is the first requirement in VTrans for us to consider before we go to the items that are listed under HPP. So I ask why that wouldn't be included as a broad category.
So for us, that is not a discrete category, operations. I mean, the term operations can mean two separate things. If you're improving operations, all of the things that I listed would improve operations. So it leaves a large gap for interpretation of what is meant by it. And I think what we're trying to do here is be more efficient and be a little more targeted on what we're doing so that the screening process doesn't get impacted by this. Operations improvements for the division, and what I think you mean by operations might be different. But all of these improvements that are listed here absolutely improve operations.
Let's go to the next slide for a second and see if we can tease some of that out, Mr. Casper.
Yeah, because I don't understand it from that description. Thank you.
So some examples of Round 5 funded HPP projects that are not of statewide or regional significance. We selected a few projects across the state to highlight. I'm not going to go through every single example, but you see a variety of small projects here that are either at a one intersection level or very short pedestrian improvements. There's one here that's approximately 200 feet of sidewalk with upgraded pedestrian crossings, or short turn lane extensions, 400 feet of turn lane extension on a singular intersection. So these are the types of projects that we are funding out of HPP currently. And the main goal here is to go away from those kind of funding with HPP. And they are still eligible if they are submitted by a locality. I think there might be a little confusion out there on them not being eligible at all. They are, of course, eligible for the Smart Scale program, just not under the refined definition of HPP eligibility.
So let me say this. I'm trying to get to Mr. Kasperitz's question, and I'm not sure we're there yet, but we'll work on that.
I can further clarify.
So the first two projects on this list, and this is not the group, this is not the whole list, obviously. And I want to make sure we didn't cherry pick the thing, but the first project I'm very familiar with, as is Mr. Lawson, because he lives right there and my farm is really close to it. And that's no more a high priority project for the state than not. It's just not. It's just like, okay, it's a nice project, but is it high priority for the Commonwealth? Sure. Or is it for the region? I would say no, it's not. I would go to the second one, and I'm not familiar with that, and I'm sure it's a good thing, but is a park and ride lot really what we're talking about when we're talking about high priority projects? A park and ride lot at a trail, is that a high priority project or not for the Commonwealth? And so the envisioning of this, and Mr. Kasperitz and Ms. Hines can jump in because they were there. The envisioning of this was more, if you go back to the definitions, it's big projects that had big impact, and they were high priority because they were regional, because they were of statewide significance. This project was of statewide significance or regional significance. That's what we're trying to get at in this category. And so we saw a lot of things that came out of it that were not reflective of that. And that's the problem. And that's what we're trying to get at. So if you'll continue, Ms. Jackson, and we'll come back to Mr. Kasperitz and see if we can loop some of those things in.
Mr. Secretary,
Ms. Hines.
before we leave this one, and I much appreciate having more definition, and I much support high priority projects being very impactful. But there are two things that I would like to suggest here, and one of them is more a matter of messaging than anything else.
Which slide?
The one
Go
before
back.
that,
Go back to
Brooke,
the
if
slide
you don't
you're on.
mind.
Yeah.
So we have high capacity and fixed guideway transit. For those who don't know the lingo, it's BRT bus rapid transit or light rail. Those are the things that, where you've got a dedicated lane. That's why it's called fixed guideway. So it would be useful, I think, to just, put those two terms there, including LRT and BRT it's there in the technical guide. I just think for clarity and communication purposes. Seems easy. The other one I've been thinking about, Mr. Secretary, and maybe Brooke can help me understand, is up here we do a lot of what we're calling, there's a lot of corridor redevelopment. It may cross jurisdictions, it may not, but it's longer than a mile or two. It's usually, a significant portion of road. And it might, that kind of corridor redevelopment might include a number of different things. It might TDM, signal prioritization, some intersection repairs, adding sidewalk, maybe even adding a bike lane. All of that would be in corridor redevelopment. And it seems to me that we would want projects that bundled that in such a way that then the corridor worked better for everybody who's trying to use the corridor. To me, that's a impactful, high priority kind of thing. Let's get more people through here. And so that would be what I would suggest maybe we think about adding is corridor redevelopment with the, some kind of a caveat that says can include multiple strategies all played out at the same time on the same geography. That's a lot. We do a lot of analysis up here, honestly, that way on our corridors. That's how MBTA's plan is structured. MBTC looks at things that way. I think that's really the future of redevelopment in our urban areas. So I would just offer that.
Those are essentially operational improvements that Ms. Hines is describing.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, before I'm going to be able to vote in favor of this, I'm going to have to see more color on the definitions. I think Scott raised a point that I share concern with regard to operational improvements. I think we also need to keep in mind that not all traffic is local on corridors of statewide significance. So if there's a big rock sitting in the middle of Route 17, it may not be much of a project, it may not cost very much, but if you moved it, it would have a significant impact on a corridor of statewide significance. So I'd just like to see more color, more definition.
It absolutely, if the highway was blocked, you're absolutely right, but the R cut at Route 17, whatever the road was, is not one of those.
Some could be.
No,
I don't
no
know
question.
about that one.
Yeah.
And I would agree that some of these projects listed here, including one in my district, are not projects of statewide significance. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to get at. And the operational thing, and I hear Ms. Hines as well, I mean, I don't think we're trying to be exclusive. We're just trying to get it right. So, I hear you in terms of does that fit into this definition, and why shouldn't it? Or why should it? She said it should, but, and then the operational, I'm not exactly sure what that.
Well, following V-Trans guidance, which is, of course.
I'm just talking about where that fits in here.
I don't think it does. That's why I brought it up.
Ms. Jackson?
It does not currently represent what you're discussing in the current definition.
In the corridor or in the operational?
There are some components that could overlap. They're talking about actually creating a corridor of multi-features and components that is not fully represented here in this definition.
Is there
It has complexity to it. I will say that. There is complexity in determining what you think what is a corridor, how long is a corridor, how much does the operations need to improve to be considered giving operational improvement. If you do 2 intersections, is that a whole corridor? There is a lot to break down, and it adds a lot of layer of complication to the process in coming up with what a corridor means. It doesn't mean that we can't have that conversation and keep working towards it. I do want to warn that that is the next layer that comes onto it, is that there is no discrete definition for what we're discussing.
Well, we'll work on it. I will say, Ms. Hines, to your point, and it's something I was trying to reference earlier, we will have worked on this for a year come December, and it's not going to be perfect. And to your point, if we wait on the application change, to your point, we can always come back in 2 years and change that, or we come back next year and change it if we wanted to. So I caution us as we get through these last couple months, 2 or 3 months of work here, that we don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because we're not going to get to perfect, and we can chase this forever. We want to get it as good as we can get it, and all these things are I think are great points we've made today. But to Ms. Jackson's point, there are also some difficulties to get there. So we'll grind through that here now that and the operational thing. Mr. Kaspert's left. Mr. Kaspert's will grind through as well to see how we can get that in. But
Mr. Secretary.
yes, sir,
I would
Mr.
also
Leonard.
concur with Dr. Smoot that we do need to see the definition of the different elements, specifically what's a new bridge?
What's a new bridge? What's a new bridge?
It's a bridge that
Putting down new.
is new.
It's not a
We
replacement.
replaced the bridge, is it new?
So in smart scale rules, the replacement of a bridge has to include new capacity. So that would be a maintenance project if you're just replacing the bridge as is. So that is a specific rule in the smart scale process. I think some of the nuance that Mr. Laird is alluding to is that, is a pedestrian bridge the same as a vehicle bridge? There is a little bit of nuance in that because we have pedestrian grade separated crossings versus bridge. And I think a lot of that comes down to validation of features is really important. If an applicant selects the wrong feature, it is very important to make sure that they are selecting the correct feature. So we spend a long time validating the correct input of those features. And I think if there's some clarification that we can provide, we can absolutely work towards that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, Ms. Jackson.
So in companion with the HPP definition, we recommended removing step 2. And this is the current funding steps are listed here as follows. Step 1 allocates district grant program funding on a district-wide basis. Step 2, as it currently stands, allocates HPP funding, our statewide high priority pot funding, on a district-wide basis. Step 3 allocates HPP funding on a statewide basis. So the theory here is the HPP program is statewide funding, and it should be distributed accordingly by statewide and not by district. And to further give this example, in round 5, step 2, 49% of HPP funds were distributed with a district focus and not a statewide focus. Of the $557 million available in HPP, $274 million was distributed in step 2 on a district scoring basis, not a statewide ranking basis. So the proposal here is to discontinue step 2, which provides the statewide HPP dollars, and focus on sorting it by the smart scale score and ranking it on a statewide level.
So, Ms. Jackson, one of the critiques had been that you have projects in HPP that don't get funded that have a higher score than projects that do get funded. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
on a
that,
statewide
and that was
basis.
sort of because we segmented into districts, you had that, and it was a program that was was anticipated to be about statewide significance. And so you had an imbalance where your state project was more significant and had a higher score than mine, but mine got funded, and yours did not, Ms. Sellers.
Can we get
So
a
we're
copy?
addressing some of that.
Can we get a copy of all the district, of all the projects so that we can see what the sorting
In
is going to
HPP?
do? Yeah, in HPP specifically. We have our district-specific, and I can
I
understand.
asked for that 2 days ago. so
Okay, that would
absolutely.
be helpful for, especially those of us representing a
100%.
district.
Yeah, 100%. So we're running all of them, and we just couldn't get it done.
So just to summarize this slide, what we're proposing here would be to go from step 1 to step 3, and both step 1 and step 3 would be sorted by the smart scale score. And that's the proposal.
Back up a second. Right now, our policy is in step 3 to look at benefit only, correct?
That's correct.
And we're saying we would change that. So we'd use the same concept, which is cost benefit, as opposed to just benefit. Why do we go to benefit only when the whole system is designed to be cost benefit? Why do we do that? And the question is, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You know, the whole system is designed around a model of cost benefit, and then we don't use it. So it doesn't make a lot of sense as far as I'm concerned. That's why that's being driven that way. So I just wanted to I didn't want to gloss over the fact that we just use smart scale score. We haven't been doing that in step 3. We've been using the benefit score out of smart scale, not the cost benefit score out of smart scale. And I don't know why that we would do that. And the consultant said, why do you do that? All right, Ms. Jackson.
Lastly, we recommended modifying the land use factor to a multiplier and modifying the factor weightings. This is a 2-step process in the recommendation. The first step is to assign current land use factor weighting to other factor categories. And I put the table here for reference. We got a clarifying question about that last meeting. And the second step then would be to use the normalized land use factor as a multiplier on all other benefits. And that's 1 plus the normalized score divided by 100. In the proposed, in order to be funded, a project has to have points in other categories, and those points are going to be boosted by where it is, the land use score. If it's the top scoring land use factor, the 100, using that calculation there, then the benefit points in all other categories would be doubled. And that's how that works. Lastly,
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Odds.
So a conversation we had earlier, after this was first presented, I asked the question of whether the staff recommendation has made some assumptions about where the land use points would be distributed based on typology. So everybody's points are not distributed the same because everybody doesn't have the same points. I have looked at this and thought about it a lot, and I would really like to suggest a different distribution of our land use points and actually some points from congestion in typology A. And I would really like that suggestion be part of what is in the public record and what is presented at the virtual town hall meeting so that people have a chance to look at one versus the other. And so I didn't know when else to bring that up. So I'm bringing it
I'll
up.
work it in here in a minute, Ms. Hines.
Okay, thank you.
I've already talked to Mr. Kasperitz about some of
Okay,
that.
well, again, we didn't see the presentation until this morning, Mr. Secretary, so.
I understand. I didn't see the other presentation until last night, so I didn't know about it. Thank you. Ms. Jackson.
lastly, our process/procedural changes that were recommended. We had 3 main recommendations here. The first being streamlining the SMART portal process by obtaining all the required approvals before submission. Secretary Miller was describing it perfectly. You will need to have that approval in place before you can hit the submit button. They will not be a full application. that is able to be submitted without the proper approvals in place in the application process. Second is creating the three-tier application limit of 3, 4, and 6, increased from our original staff recommendation of a 2-tier limit at 2 and 5. And again, this is to focus on applicant priorities and improve the overall outcomes and increase the application success rate. And then lastly, tying consensus funding decisions to performance and delivering of projects, and considering the applicants delivering performance in the final consensus funding decisions. So what are our next steps? This is been all of the final presentation of the actual recommendations that we've had through February to now. We do plan on having the public virtual town hall on October 31st. We brought that up last month that we were hoping to schedule it here in the coming months. So we will be sending out notification of the virtual town hall this week to all of our Smart Scale, Smart Portal users, and to any stakeholders that have participated in comments so far. They will get an invite to this. It will be a recorded town hall. Comments and questions can be provided ahead of time, and we will also take comments during the public town hall. And then we will hope to come back to you in December for board action on this proposed Smart Scale policy.
Thank you. Let me address a couple of points that have been raised. So over the last month or so, there's been some discussion amongst board members about some alternatives. And they've been floated around various ways. And what I'm concerned about is that while I think everything that we've done has been according to, I know everything we've done has been according, or I think everything that we've done, I should say, because I don't know everything, but has been done according to the rules in terms of open meetings and that sort of thing, so I'm very comfortable about that. But I want our discussions to not be not in this forum, because we all get the benefit if we have discussions here. We get the benefit of a group discussion and we get to hear other people's points of view, as opposed to if I go talk to you and 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 talk to you, we got the benefit of me talking to a lot of different people, but we didn't get the group dynamic. And so I know that Mr. Kasperitz has floated some ideas in that regard, and I think they certainly should be floated here at this meeting. And I know Ms. Hines has some ideas as well, so we definitely want to have those and get those on the table so that we can all understand them. The other point in doing this, and we should do this as we go forward, is we are not reluctant in any way to take anything that anybody wants to discuss if it fits into a regular agenda and discuss it, and to hand something out and have a conversation. When we do it, if we just do it at the meeting and I just hand something out, there's no time for the staff to look at anything, to give any advice or counsel or anything else. So I would encourage you, as you have those things that you'd like to float or you'd like to have questions on, ask us or tell us. And we'll do that, and we'll do it in a way that will be most helpful to all of us, so that we get some feedback from our staff, if we can, in advance, and give that to you, as well as we have the group speak, and the group, the benefit of good governance and having the group look at things together. So that's the way I'd like to proceed as we go forward. And so, Mr. Kasperitz, I know you've got some information you'd like to speak to, and I think Ms. Hines does as well, and if anybody else does, that'd be great too.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Just a couple of comments, and of course, I think we're all committed to good governance here and transparency. But we are faced with a very complex decision process. We have received information often just before the start of the meeting, giving us little time to assess or review or identify questions. And then we have relatively short periods of time to discuss it until we move on to the next iteration. I have consistently, my time on this board, taken the month between meetings to conduct research and prepare for the next meeting. And in doing so, I did some outreach one-to-one with board members to try to identify their thoughts on the fundamentals of the weighting schemes. And in conducting those one-on-one conversations and gaining and gathering information, I did find that there's a consensus that is, I think, in some ways different than the one that's been presented. And I took the time to consolidate that information, and I did send it to staff about 3 weeks ago, just as an alternative consideration, not suggesting that it was for anything other than discussion in an open forum like we're having today. So it was merely a attempt.
Mr. Kaspertz, I hear you. Just, can you get to the information? Listen, consensus is reached by members of this board, and you're not the spokesperson for the board. Okay, so I'd like to see consensus at a board meeting where people have an opportunity to have group speak. If you don't disagree with that, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm not changing mine. I don't like it when it operates that way because it's not a group conversation and it's not a reasonable way to draw consensus. We have a lady who's no longer the head of a board because she did that and got her in trouble. It's not good governance. It will never be good governance, and I won't condone it as something that's going to get us to the best result. So if you want to have something, submit it. We'll give it to the staff, and we'll go through it that way. If you want to submit at the board level, at the board meeting, you're entitled to do that.
I understand. Then I will submit it to staff.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, please, present.
Shall I go through the changes that were discussed?
Well, you can.
So to Ms. Hines' point, in the A category area, the data derived from discussions would support a 20% safety score, a 40% congestion score, a 25% accessibility score, and 5 economic development and 10 for environment.
In what category?
That's category, just type A.
Just type A.
Type A. In type B, again, data derived from discussions would indicate that a 25% safety score, a 20% congestion score, and a 25% accessibility score would be the preference. In areas C and D, the only change would be to increase the safety score by the 10 points that would come from land use to 35% for C areas and 40% for D areas. And those are the changes, Mr. Secretary.
And the analysis for that suggests the impact of what? What is the analysis?
I'm going to call it a distillation of information that I've received and feedback and trying to understand the board's perspective on what the weighting categories should and might be. I'm not recommending, other than the category A. This is simply a distillation of conversations which I thought would advance the efforts to move this to closure. And I would encourage any board members now to make comments or speak on their particular areas or their preference.
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Wallace, thanks for your encouragement.
To that end, and hoping, sensing that we're getting to somewhere in an actual vote, and I did note the percentages. I would agree with that, and I think they're well thought out. And I would also think that it would be helpful if we can try to develop a consensus or a thought of what is a consensus on these items. We can narrow this thing down so that when we get to that meeting in December, which I think is our next scheduled one, we'll have hopefully fewer things to talk about as opposed to seemingly the same things. And actually, hopefully this helps staff too, because it starts to narrow it, and then we can focus on other items such as what a new bridge is and things like that. The other item I would throw out, I greatly appreciate Ms. Hines' comments on the number of applications, and I think there's good sense in what she says is before we go to the radical change of just cutting people off, we see what happens with some of the program changes that have happened and perhaps empower staff to cut off these incomplete applications and see if that doesn't work before we go to the next step of restricting folks. And those would be two items that I would throw out, just to hopefully draw comments from other board members as to what their thoughts are on those two items.
Ms. Lawson, first,
sir.
let me address something first. Mr. Kasperitz detailed his numbers that he went through as a distillation, and I asked about analysis, and he referred to it as a distillation of what he'd heard. And then you said it was well thought out, and I've yet to see any analysis about anything that's been proposed in terms of what the impact would be, and yet we've run a gazillion scenarios of every other change that have been asked to be made to show you illustratively what the impact might be, albeit illustratively, and also had lots of discussion about it and why it was the way it should be or why it wasn't the way it should be. And we've spent a gazillion hours in meetings doing that, and this has no analysis at all.
Oh, Mr. Secretary, if I could respond to that.
It has no analysis that's been presented with it at all. It's just numbers on a page. And they may be the exact right numbers, but there's been no analysis here that's been presented and nothing to consider. Number
Mr.
one,
Secretary.
let me finish, please.
Oh, sorry.
In terms of the applications, if Ms. Jackson follows what I think you said in terms of saying that you can't, we won't score them if they're not complete, you're going to lose half. It ain't going to be a couple, it's going to be half.
Okay.
Okay, so you talk about restrictions. Her restriction that she's recommended is a lot less draconian than half. Now, I don't want to get to half, and I hear you, and I want to make sure that everybody has a bite at the apple. But the facts are the facts. A third get funded, 90% aren't ready on pre-app, and 50 aren't ready on full app. There's a problem there. And the problem is they're not getting it done, and we're doing a lot of work for no reason, for no good outcome. Those are facts, right? Now, how we'd address that, that's a whole different matter, what's the best way to address it. But we obviously have a problem. And to say, well, we'll just see, is not addressing it. Now, having said that, there are some things that will impact this as we try to improve the process and go to some of these things that are automated and go to these systems that won't let you progress, to Ms. Hines's point. And that's going to help, right? I don't know how much, and I hear what she says, and I've said it before. This is not going to get perfect here. Whatever we decide in December will not be perfect. But hopefully it'll be the very best that we can get it to be. And then a future board or the future meeting, this board could say, we missed the mark and let's adjust it again. And absolutely we can do that, and hopefully we'll do that forever. All I'm trying to get at is I don't know what the right numbers are on any of these things. I don't know the right answer on any of this, really. It's a guess, it's a belief, and we have to make a decision. But what I want to deliver to y'all as you do that is some good analysis as we can give you on scenarios that have been floated. And that's what's lacking for me today.
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Hines.
So I appreciate that, what you just said. I will say that the reason that I am supporting the changes in typology A is because we did ask NOVA VDOT staff to try to replicate to the extent that was possible, given the data that we had, which was not all the data that we asked for, Mr. Secretary. And we believe that this will deliver for typology a better mix of projects that meet the multiple different kinds of needs that we have in this district. And so that's why I'm supporting it. Congestion at 50% just really doesn't make sense for NOVA anymore. We really need to drop that percentage down. And accessibility, which looks at how people connect and move to get to jobs and other things, is raising the percentage on that some also makes a good sense in my district. And I think in Hampton Roads, based on the conversations that we've had, I see Wayne and Fred nodding their heads. So it's not that we've just pulled this out of the hat. We've used the data we had. We've tried to model it and understand it, and we have come to believe that this will deliver, as I said, a better mix of projects that address all of the variety in our districts and allow everything to move forward here. So
I hear you, Ms. Hines. You tell me again that it's a better answer, but I still don't see any analysis.
well, I have it in my bag, Mr. Secretary,
Well,
if you'd like to see it.
No, actually, what I'd like to do, Ms. Hines, is I'd like the question to come to the board, not to the Northern Virginia District. This is not about Northern Virginia. This is about the Commonwealth of Virginia. We all vote, no matter where we live, we all vote on the answer. It's to come to the board, have the staff do the analysis, present it to the board, not in your bag, but at the staff level here in a meeting, present the analysis so that everybody gets to see it and everybody gets to talk about it and everybody gets to understand it
Mr.
as
Secretary,
best.
that is absolutely how we should do this. I 100%
Can I
agree,
finish?
but
Let me
it's been very difficult.
Ms. Hines, let me finish. Didn't interrupt you. Don't interrupt me.
Pardon me.
That's how I'd like to do it, okay? And no one has sent us anything and said, please send it to the board. Please distribute this. Please do the analysis. I'm happy to do it. I don't like it the way it works the other way. To your point, it's in your bag. Well, I'm not in your bag, nor is anybody else in this room in your bag, and the detail needs to be out here so that we can all see it at the same time. We can all talk about it at the same time. Hopefully, the staff's been able to bring us some analysis of it that we can consider at the same time, and then we can make a decision. That's how it needs to operate. That's not where we are, but we're going to try to get there as quickly as we can so that we can consider all these things. But that other process is not good in my opinion. That's my opinion.
Mr. Secretary?
Yes, Mr. Merrill.
Yeah, in terms of the distribution of the weights in the categories as Mr. Kasprowitz presented from Stanton, I'm in favor of that. It happens to be what's recommended in Brooks' presentation today. We did approach our district engineer about running some scenarios if the land use were reallocated, what makes the most sense in our district, given that we're rural and congestion is not as big as the problem is in Hampton Roads and ever. I can't comment on, in particulars on Type A because I'm not a district representative from Type A, but in terms of for Type D, I'm in support of that reallocation that's proposed.
Mr. Merrill, we want you to be able to vote on Type A just like Type B.
Okay, but when you talk about the analysis, what concerns me is that, number one, I don't know exactly what you mean by analysis. Number two, I don't think we should make our decisions based upon the outcome that certain scenarios produce. I think we should make our decisions based upon what we think are the appropriate criteria. Otherwise, I think we're into gerrymandering. Well, let's not make up the map of the population until we see what the districts look like. And if it produces the outcome we like these district lines. If we don't like the outcome they produce, we'll change the district lines. So I'm uncomfortable changing criteria and weighting based upon how the outcome occurs, because I think it skews the results.
Couldn't disagree with you. I mean, couldn't agree with you more. And I've been saying that these are illustrative, right? I've been reluctant to do it because it doesn't really mean what some people will interpret it to mean. I 100% agree with you. All I want, Mr. Merrill, and the rest of my colleagues on the board, is to have each of us to have the same benefit that everyone else has of information and analysis by our staff to try to tell us what this does. Why was it? I'm not sure I agree with Ms. Hines. I'm involved in a gazillion projects right now that are all about congestion in Northern Virginia because it's still really bad. And we're looking at all sorts of things that address that. So, but Ms. Hines has lived here for a long time and she's certainly entitled to her view. All I want to do is do it here, not do it somewhere else. That's all. And I'm certainly more than willing to do that. But we are where we are today. Can't change that. And so we'll put this proposal out. We'll try to get some feedback on it in terms of how it looks, and we'll go from there.
Mr. Secretary, I would
Mr.
like to
Stant's next. Mr. Stant,
Yeah, my only point is.
then by
that
Mr. Kasprowitz.
Thank you.
that this proposal does exist, and I think it should be submitted to staff, just like you said, and let's come back. But when are we going to come back? It's going to be December, the next meeting, and we're going to be asked to make a final decision in December. When is the staff going to have the opportunity to evaluate this proposal?
It's not going to be any different than if I submit one on December 1 either, Mr. Stan. I mean, I didn't submit it. So we've been going through this every time, month by month, retreat by retreat, going through, reacting to questions and to comments in this board meeting, coming back with additional information, which we did here today with Mr. Dreiling, based on our last meeting. We've been an iterative process. We started in February. That's where we are. I didn't submit the proposal. It exists. We now have it. That's fine. We'll run it. And that's all I can do at this point. We've been looking at this for a number of months. There's an alternative. I think we ought to consider it. What do we think's good about it? What do we think's bad about it? We've had no conversation about that whatsoever at this board meeting. And that's just not the way to do it. So I can't help what's happened. I didn't do that. I'm just reacting to it, and I want to make sure that we get it and do the best we can with it, because it may be by far superior. I mean, it's an opinion, right? But I'd certainly like to hear from our staff and from the rest of the group to tell us what they think about it. That's all. It's pretty simple.
Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Kaspertz.
I'd just like to correct some timing, just so it's clear. I presented the accumulated data immediately after our last meeting to staff, before I left Richmond. I sent the consolidation of that data within a week of that discussion. So I did not spring this on anyone. It wasn't an attempt to delay it or not make it part of the discussion. It's just this is a process that evolved over the course of several weeks. And I want to make sure that I got it in the proper hands after our last meeting in Richmond.
Mr. Kaspertz, with due respect, I'm the Secretary of Transportation for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm the chairman of this board. You call me up whenever you feel like it to tell me what you think and what you feel, right? And I respond to that. You didn't send this to me. It didn't come to the chairman of the board. It didn't say, please put this on the agenda. None of that occurred, Mr. Kaspertz. So find what you said. I'm the chairman, I'm the secretary, I run the meetings by definition. If you want something considered at a board meeting, you've been here a long time, sir, and you've been an assistant secretary. You know how it works. Give it to me, I'll put it on there, okay? That's how it works. That's how every board works. The chairman does that on the agenda. I'm happy to do that. We are where we are here. I'm not criticizing or complaining. I'm merely saying this is the way I'd like to see it work for the benefit of all the board members and for the public. It's pretty simple, but we can't we can't unring the bell. The thing's out there, that's fine. We'll consider it. We'll do our very best to get some information back on that. If we think it's outstanding, we'll say it's outstanding. If we think there's a problem, we'll tell you what they think the problem is, and we'll have a discussion, and we'll just try to figure it out between now and then. Anybody else? Yes, sir, Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and I just feel it necessary in listening to all of this back and forth. But Brooke, after last meeting, I had engaged you and we met to discuss several things that I sent you on the 28th of September. At the end of the discussion of those 6 things, you mentioned to me that, unfortunately perhaps, no one else was raising the same issues. So I kind of took that as a challenge, and I communicated my concerns or ideas with other board members one-on-one. It's not to violate any rules. And I think for the benefit of those who I didn't speak to because just time ran out, I just ran out of time. But I'd like to read these just for the remaining board members.
What are you reading, Mr. Coleman?
I'm reading the email that I sent to Ronique and Brooke that resulted in a meeting with Fred and I back on the 28th of September. And what I ask is for consideration, number one, please provide a written description of the existing methodology to measure the land use factor. State statute requires that the factor must be quantifiable and achievable to comply. Number two, reasonable process starting with a reasonable time frame for both the development and construction phase after approval. This prevents projects from languishing for years without any action. Language in the application that requires support data such as surveys to be representative of the people using the facility, not just a selected group of residents. Language in the application that requires disclosure of project in total, which will prevent busting up large projects into small segments, which provides a better scoring opportunity. The wisdom being that a small project doesn't show value until the entire project is complete. Number five, eliminate the $10 million factor in scoring process. If it can't be explained and justified, it shouldn't be part of the process. Number six, skin in the game. Provide a scoring incentive for localities submitting an application which provides funding. This will be an incentive to move on projects sooner. Two, submit higher quality projects, and additional might reduce the number of applications, which is a stated CTB goal. A locality submits without posing an application limit, which has received some pushback. Follow up to that discussion or that meeting. What I wanted to do is I wanted to have, specific to the $10 million division, I wanted to have something that showed me the benefit score and a ranking from highest to lowest, and then after the $10 million factor was applied. Because in my view, there's some bias associated with that $10 million. I think there's been some discussion about if it is true bias or not, but I'd like to illustrate that by something John sent me Sunday afternoon in helping me understand this. And I referenced Smart Scale Project 8952, which is a Suffolk Transit in Windsor to Suffolk commute bus service, and it's for $408,000. It had a benefit score of 6.35, but after the application of the $10 million, it jumped to a Smart Scale score of 155, in fact, 156 rounded. Then I go down to Project 9009, that's a Richmond project. It's Broad Street bus transit system that the total cost is $23,852,736. The Smart Scale request is for $15,052,736. So what that says to me is the Richmond's going to put in $8.8 million. Their benefit score was 26. After the $10 million application, it goes down to 17. So on this page, it's the highest ranking score by benefit, but after application of the $10 million, it dropped to 17. So we have an application, the first one I read, $416,000, that jumped to 156 as a Smart Scale score. So how is that not a bias?
Mr. Coleman, you have a lot in what you said, but you centered on the bias concern. I think you're conflating benefit score and Smart Scale score, and they're not the same. We referenced this earlier in the meeting when we talked about step 3 being only on benefit score. It doesn't matter what it costs. It doesn't matter if the benefit is a millionth of the cost or a million times the cost. It doesn't matter. It's just whatever the benefit is. So it doesn't care how much you spend on it or how little you spend on it. Smart Scale, in general, takes the benefit score and uses it as a function of the cost to get you a cost-benefit score. That is the Smart Scale score. The 10 million that you're talking about, I think, is just a number that we divide them all by, so that instead of having an answer that's this long, it's that long. And we divide everybody by the same number. It doesn't change any ranking whatsoever. It's a math fact. It changes no ranking. It changes all the numbers, but the ranking doesn't change. If it was number one, it's still number one. If it's number two, it's still number two. If it's the last one, it's still the last one, and it doesn't change any scoring ranking. The scores themselves are not relevant. They're all relative scores. It matters who's one, who's two, who's three, who's four. It doesn't matter what their score is. So all they did was take a really big number and divide it by another really big number so that we have a 6.3 as opposed to a 6,547,899 number. That's all that does. And the conflating between the benefit score and the Smart Scale score, we don't look at benefit score by itself. We look at it as a function of cost. That's why if localities put in a bunch of money, our cost is less. And so our score goes up because we didn't have to put the money in. If they put in less money, the score goes down because we got to put more money in to get the same benefit. So that's how that works. There's no bias by the division. That's just normalizing a number from a 12-digit number to a 1-digit number or a 2-digit number.
That's the explanation I was given, but then with John's information he gave me, it seems like there's an intent here to score per dollar.
It is. Yeah, absolutely.
The less money that Smart Scale has to put up, the
100%.
score per dollar gets better.
Absolutely.
But that favors small projects. This project down here in Richmond, these folks are putting in $8.8 million and don't get any advantage whatsoever, no incentivization to put 8.8. Why would they want to put it in? If the goal is to limit or to give preference to $10 million projects and under, why don't we just set the limit at $10 million?
No, that's not, the $10 million projects and under has nothing to do with anything. I don't know where you're getting that from.
Right from the sheet.
No.
Just data.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have this spreadsheet, but for my district, I did the same thing, and it does. When you do that divider by 10 million, it will change the Smart Scale score.
Of course it will, but does it change the ranking?
It does change the
No,
ranking.
it does not. You cannot take a string of numbers, here are my numbers, and divide them all by the same, and tell me it changes the ranking. It's physically, mathematically impossible. It doesn't work like that. If I've got a ranking and I'm 100, okay? And I got 100 people, and it goes from 199, I got 100 projects. And the 100 is 100, and the 1 is the 1. And now I got 100 projects, right? And that's the score. Divide by 10, tell me what changes. Nothing changes. The 100 goes to 10, the 99 goes to 9.9, the 98 goes to 9.8, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The ranking stays exactly the same. If I divide by 100, I get 1 at the top. I get 0.9 at the next, 0.99 at the next one, 0.98, 0.97, 0.96, 0.95. The ranking stays exactly the same.
That would be true, but if you take the benefit score and then you take 10 million divided by the project cost, you get a multiplier factor. And that multiplier factor then is applied to the benefit score to get the Smart Scale score. You're not taking every score and divided by 10 million. You're taking project A, and it's a cost of $500,000. $10 million divided by 500,000 gets you a multiplier of 20. 20 times the benefit score gets you the Smart Scale score. You take that $10 million divided by a project by 25, you get 0.4. 0.4 times the benefit score takes the benefit score of 7 down to 2.8.
I'm not following you, but I will.
10 million. You take a $10 million number, which is standard to do the normalization of our project. One project is $500,000. The one Wayne talked about was 408. You take $10 million, you divide it by 408, you get a factor, that comes out to 26. 26 times the benefit score of 6 gives them a new smart scale score of 155.
I'll look at the example.
Okay.
I can't do it without looking at it.
I'll mention this because I've been trying to get this ranking for weeks, and
If you're telling me it changes the ranking, I want to see it.
I can show you in Fredericksburg
Yeah, and
District.
so I had some discussions with my colleagues here in the meeting, so I think everything was above board. And quickly, Ty had his staff rank it
Highest staff.
highest to lowest, and it changes it. It just, and we'll be glad to share that with you because I can't work this spreadsheet, but I got people who can. But I can sit and look at the
Mr. Lawson.
numbers.
Mr. Secretary, if I may, Ms. Sellers, when you say it changes the ranking, is it changing the ranking as derived by the benefit score?
The benefit score doesn't change, but so Smart Scale is this really complex algorithm, right? All these things have other algorithms that you roll up. So what I did is took all those numbers, put it into a spreadsheet, and started to see where numbers changing. And what happens is that $10 million thing, this divider that we have created, does do something in the numbers, and it is at that stage that we see the benefit score with that $10 million and that how much the county or how much the total cost is. We are seeing then the Smart Scale score that changes, that comes out of that, does change the ranking. And Garrisonville Road is a project in my district that it was the very lowest score in the district grant program. But if you take that $10 million away, it's like the third highest project. So it does change the prioritization.
If you do it by dollar versus per $10 million, do you not get the same answer?
I don't know. I would have to play
Because
with it.
that's where we come back to, because that's, and I'm glad to share with everyone the schedule that I sent Mr. Coleman. But if you take the benefit and divide it by the cost, you get benefit per dollar, which is Smart Scale score. And they have lots and lots of decimal points. And if you do it per 10 million, like your personal property taxes or your real estate taxes, you're paying it per $100 or per $1,000. You're not paying it per dollar, and it's just done as a matter of what the number looks like. The multiplication is the same.
Let's put it to bed. We're not going to do that at this moment. We'll take the examples that you're looking at. We'll run them and do the math, and it will either change it or it won't. If it works the way we're saying it works, and listen, if you're right, nobody wants it wrong, right? Nobody wants it wrong. So if you're right, it'll be great to fix it. But my understanding and what I've seen about how it works is we're basically just taking an answer. We're taking an answer, and we're dividing it by every answer by the same number. If you do that, if you take an answer and you divide all those answers by the same number, it's not going to change the relative position. It's not going to.
Right.
If we did that. If that's not what we're doing, then we need to figure out what the heck we're doing.
It may not be the 10 million, but there's something going on with the money when we do that dividing. There's something going on with the money, and I don't know if we can solve it before we make these recommendations
Sure we
in
can.
December.
We can resolve
but is
that
this
today.
something we can continue to explore? Because there's also this issue of not all money that the counties put up is created equal. And I've shared with my colleagues that we have counties in the Fredericksburg district that went to bond referendum. The voters voted on this. And so if we don't use this money for these projects as voted on by the voters, the money goes away. They can't move this money to something else. And so we're not taking into consideration that money coming from the local governments or coming from the regional districts is not all created equal. And I think the money discussion is a much bigger discussion that maybe we can have in a future date and get through maybe this first and then talk about it later, but I don't know. It is something.
Ms. Gaspard, you look like you wanted to say something.
I just, at the end of this,
I was reading your body language.
I had two more requests for consideration.
Well, listen, I want to put this to bed, and I don't believe, from what I understand, there's not a bias in there. We'll sit in a room, we'll go through the math, we'll go through it and decide. But if it works the way I said it worked, it will not, by definition, mathematical fact, it will not change the ranking if it works the way I said it will work. If you take a string of numbers and you rank them by their size and you divide them all by the same thing, it doesn't change anything. It just changes the number to a smaller number. They're still in the same order, period. That's just a math fact. We'll do it. I'm lost. Mr. Kasparitz.
Yeah, two additional requests for consideration, Mr. Secretary. Within the categories, we have in the staff-provided recommendations changed the congestion metric to a 10-year look ahead rather than current. I would like to request that we consider a 50% current and 50% 10-year look ahead as an alternative to moving from current to 10-year.
Doesn't the 10-year look ahead include the current?
It grows the current.
It's the current, and as it's going to look 10 years from now. It takes the current, right? So you're saying we should just ignore the future for the current? Because I think we're looking at the whole thing. We're looking at today, the current, and then how that might get worse or better.
It's not the way I understood it, sir. I understood it that we were looking at the 10-year congestion projection as the metric to assess congestion in that category.
But it starts at the current.
I'm not sure where it starts, but again, I'm confused by that, if nothing else. My recommendation would be that we split it between current and future congestion to come up with that score.
Well, I'd rather get you unconfused than give a solution on something we're not sure of.
Okay, well, that's the first. The second is I would like to suggest a weighting change in accessibility, which currently has A1, 2, and 3 at 60, 20, 20. I believe that we would benefit accessibility on the multimodal side by increasing the scoring or the weighting on the third category, A3, and would suggest 40, 20, 40 weighting as a way to do that.
If you can follow him, let's document his suggestion, please, because I'm not following it.
Say that one more
It's a weighting within the category,
40,
Mr.
20,
Secretary.
20.
You're talking about the accessibility
40, 20,
column?
40.
40, 20, 40.
40, 20, 40.
For accessibility for what?
For the three categories that are scored under accessibility.
So the measures. Yeah, so we have A1.
A1, 2, and 3.
A1, A2, A3, so.
I'm looking at this
access
slide.
to jobs,
I'm
Just to be clear,
disadvantage.
reduce A1 from 60 to 40.
I'm looking at this slide.
It's not on there. Leave
That's what-
A2 at 20, and then increase A3
Can we
from,
go to that slide?
I don't believe it's in here.
I guess it would best relate to this concept
Actually, we passed it. Yeah.
is, it's a sub-measure
That's
underneath accessibility, just like the ED sub-measures. So he's suggesting that those weightings that are associated with A1, A2, A3 are modified, just as we have percentages that those weights take on the measures for
correct.
ED.
Thank you.
See if you can capture that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Coleman.
One last comment. As I just read through all these, I wanted to make sure, Brooke, that you knew that when speaking to individuals, they had the same concerns going through RAM 5, and I kind of just, I don't know, prodded their thought process to reflect back on parts of it. And whether it becomes something as a board we want to consider and moving toward or have you address. But there are other board members now that have concerns over certain of those 6 points that I brought up.
Ms. Coleman, I'd encourage the other board members to tell us what their concerns are, not for you to represent them.
Well, I'm not trying to represent them.
I
I'm
understand,
not
but-
naming names, but I am opening the opportunity for Brooke to know there's more than just me that are concerned about
Mr.
these.
Coleman, it doesn't work like that. We have a board here. They're all here and present. If they want to say something, they want to express their concerns, this is the place to do it, okay? It's not to do it to Wayne so that he can tell us. That's not the way to do it. If somebody has a concern, that's why we meet here, that's why we're in public, they should address the concern, okay? And because we want to hear those concerns and we want to address them. And we want everybody to understand so that we can get a better outcome, all right? So if there's somebody here that wants to speak up, you're encouraged to speak up, and if you don't, that's fine too. But what I don't want to do is saying, well, I represent a lot of people. I mean, stop all that, for God's sakes. They're here. They can represent themselves. Okay?
Mr. Secretary.
Let's do
Representing
that.
anybody, Mr. Secretary.
Excuse me?
I said, I'm not saying I'm not representing anybody here at this board. What I'm saying is I was challenged that nobody else seemed to have the same concerns. I just want to bring it to the attention that there are other board members who have concerns. Whether they want to speak up or not, it's up to them.
Mr. Secretary.
It doesn't work by proxy, Mr. Coleman.
Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Lawson.
Just to try to get some sense of our process, what I'm hearing is the percentages that and the weights that we had discussed before, you want staff to run those numbers and get back to us. I'm also hearing that there's going to be some analysis of this multiplier effect that many of us are getting this odd result that you're saying can't be, because if you simply divide it.
The division, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And so what I'm wondering is, I mean, we can all talk around it some more, but what I'm hearing you, but I want to try to get some confirmation, is what you're saying is you're going to get staff to run these numbers, if you will, to do some more analysis, and then we're going to reconvene at some
No,
point?
what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the data that's been given and the suggestions that's been given.
Okay.
They'll look at them. We're on a short time frame, obviously. We're going to try to get back to you and say what we think about them,
Okay.
right? We're going to try to do that, and then we'll consider it. But we're obviously bumping up against deadlines here, and that makes it more difficult. In terms of the other thing, I think that's solved in 20 minutes. It's either right or wrong, one way or the other, and it's just math. We'll look at the scenarios, and if it's changing a ranking, it shouldn't change a ranking. And if it's not changing the ranking, it's not changing the rankings. And it's either one or the other. We'll put it to bed.
Whether it's 20 minutes or 2 hours, I think that sounds like a productive process. If we could get the feedback, the analysis from staff as soon as possible, I guess the next question is the plan then to devote a day of a work session on whatever that day is for our meeting in December, so that we can grind through this stuff?
We have a work session in December.
Okay.
And we have a workshop meeting, just like we do in most of our meetings, so we've got that time. What we don't have is a meeting scheduled for November, and it's not on anybody's calendars, and there's been discussion as to whether we want to do that or not, and it gets difficult given that we're in October. But Mr. Stant has his finger up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, simple question. If we're going to look at this in December, we're going to come to some final resolution. How do you envision the process working of going through these various scenarios, the various points that people have raised? I mean, you're going to...
There have been recommendations made by the staff. There have been recommendations or points of view by the board. What we wanted to do is get them all vetted and get as much information out there with as much analysis as we can possibly give you as to how that looks or what's good or what might be bad about it. And then we'll go through them one by one and make one and make a decision. If somebody wants to do them as a package and everybody's in agreement, I'll do them as a package. If we want to break them up one by one, we'll do them one by one. The staff recommendation will become as a package, and you can either break it apart or not. I'm not gonna try to not allow that to happen. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because each of these are discrete and different. It would be helpful, though, to my earlier point, the more people get their views on the record and help the rest of us understand what those are, the better it will be when we get to that time. And so to the extent anybody else wants to either do it or submit something written to each of us we can send out, that's fine too.
Should it be sent to you so it can be distributed?
Or
Okay,
John or
that's
me
fine.
or somebody.
That's
yeah.
fine.
I want to get my views out, Mr. Secretary. I'm feeling like that clock's right.
I'm with you, Mr. Merrill.
Mr. Secretary, could I just ask one more
Ms. Hahn, yes,
point
ma'am.
of clarification? Because I do, this is, for me, very important. Mr. Kasperwitz has given you the revised weights, and he's made some suggestions about changing some of the subcategory weightings. And I think for us to understand how it's the same or how it's different, we actually do need to see the run. We need to see the scenario analyzed in the same way that we've seen the staff scenario analyzed. And I just really want to make sure that that's what's going to happen, that we're going to see the numbers.
I don't know, Ms. Hines. I don't know yet.
Because?
Because I just was presented with a scenario. I got to go find out how much, what's going to take, what we got to do. What exactly does that mean? I don't know yet.
Mr. Secretary, when will you let us know whether we'll be able to see those numbers or not?
If you're asking me if we, I'm not sure what you're asking me. Do we throw those numbers and redo what? Round 5, round 4, round 3? Part of it?
Mr. Secretary, it seems to me that we should just do as we've done with the staff proposal.
Just round 5?
Just show us round 5, show us how it's different or not. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's different in some important ways. I don't know the answer because we didn't have the numbers that we could run.
I understand, and we'll endeavor to do that, and we'll figure that out in the next day or so, whether that's feasible or not. I just don't know sitting here at the table whether it is or whether it isn't, but we'll endeavor to do that. I will remind you, as I have been reminded today, and I continue to remind you, all this is illustrative in terms of round 5. Doesn't mean round 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, but it is something, Ms. Hines.
Yes, it does.
It's something.
It shows some relative changes, exactly.
I'm endorsing it. We brought it here.
Right.
But I just keep giving that caveat because we need to remember that. So that would be the intent, is to try to do that. And that's what I would like to bring. Listen, we only have the resources that we have. And if all of us brought a proposal in every meeting to go run this and go do that, it wouldn't work very well. You know that. This is really important, right? And we want to get this as good as we can get it. To your point, we do have an opportunity to continue to iterate, and we should as a board. But we're going to do the very best we can to get the best data that we can to give you the best opportunity to make the best decision when we finally decide. So our intention would be to give you everything that we can possibly give you to do that. That's the intention, regardless of what that is. And I hope we can run this and give you what you need.
That would be terrific.
That would be the intent.
Mr. Secretary.
Ms. Sellers and then Mr. Lawson. Mr. Lawson, Mr. Laird, excuse me.
Mr. Secretary, my
The
question
boys.
is, if we change those subcategories under accessibility, that's uniform through all the districts, correct? Correct. So, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're getting
Right, we're getting real into
listen, folks.
Real into the weeds. I have
It's
to
not
talk
just
to you
that.
about
Round 5.
We're like right.
It's refinements.
Right here, the staff is like right here, okay? The whole organization is running right here. Maybe it's right here. Okay, we can still breathe, but people are running really hard. There's a lot of work that goes into this, and it's not the only thing that we do. So there's a resource issue here, and I'm just trying to balance that because I can't kill them, right? To balance that with giving us information. And I'm going to err on the side of us getting good information. That's what I'm going to do. So we're going to do the very best we can to my point to Ms. Hines and the rest of you.
And I think they've done a really great job. Yeah, there
Yeah,
are things
you ask the
working.
questions, they bring back the answers
They
in the
do.
next meeting, and that's
They've
what we're
been
trying to
super
do.
helpful, and want to make sure, as I've expressed to others, that we do recognize that they have been very, very helpful to me going through this, and I get very data-oriented, so I do appreciate all your help. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Jackson, the only thing wrong with your presentation today is that on my sheet that Carol gave me, it says 20 minutes. Just saying. You didn't do that. We did that to you. Is there anybody else that wants to jump in? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Laird.
Mr. Secretary, it seems to me that we're bumping up against, well, not today, but in the future, up against some time limits and time constraints. And I hate to suggest it, but is another November meeting necessary so we can hash these things out before we have to vote on these issues?
Dr. Smoot.
Mr. Secretary.
He huffed.
I think everyone tries to order their schedule to attend CTB meetings. And if we do have another meeting, I think we need to assure we can find a time that everyone can participate.
Mr. Laird, I would be, I'm more than willing to have another meeting. I agree with what Dr. Smoot said. Of course, I'd like to have fewer meetings than more meetings, but we got to be able to get the people's business done properly. And so I'm going to do whatever the board wants me to do in that regard, and I'll make myself available as I can to meet those dates, and I'll work really hard at it. I'm hopeful that we maybe don't have to do that, but maybe we do. I would say this, I want to get Mr. Coleman's issue, I think that can be analyzed and taken care of one way or another quickly. Ms. Hines and Mr. Kasperitz running those numbers is going to be more involved, and then we got to sort of look at them. There's no reason that I know of that we can't do that and just feed back to you. And Ms. Jackson, I need to talk to her offline about the timing of that. But at the end of the day, my vote is for getting it right, number one. Number two, having less meetings rather than more meetings, but getting it right's got to come first. We also looked at, what happens if we don't do it on time, meaning we set December as our end date. What if we slip to January? That's got impacts, to the applicants and the districts. I mean, you can shove the whole thing. You can do that. The world would not end. So we've got a couple different options there. And I just need to work through it with my group to see what might be the best ones, and we'll come back. But remember, job number one is to get the very best answer we can get, that we're all as satisfied as we can be with it, and so that's what I want to get to.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
All right? Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Your 20 minutes has expired.
Thank you.
Mr. Burrell, what time are we? Carol?
We need to depart the Hyatt promptly at 1:30.
And what's the lunch deal?
There has been a snack lunch. The vendor has a
There's a Dunkin' Donuts that way.
So what are we going to do?
Mr. Secretary, if we're going to continue on with the tour, I say that we adjourn the meeting for the day and go back to the hotel and see if we can't get food there in close proximity, since the tour starts at 1:30. Otherwise, we cancel the tour, walk up to the main terminal for some food up there, and then reconvene the meeting after lunch.
I'm well fed in general. Let me rephrase that. As my doctor referred to me one time, he said, well nourished. So I'm generally well nourished, but I do like my lunch. I think the best thing to do, I don't want to cancel the tour. The tour is important. We've done, Mr. Brewell's done some hard work, and and even more so than that, it's an important thing to see. So I want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put us into recess. We will reconvene tomorrow here and push through it. It shouldn't take a long time. Those are pretty straightforward, very straightforward issues, I think, tomorrow. We can wrap them up fairly quickly. I think we can probably do it all in 45 minutes, easy, to finish the workshop. So if we can just move back to the hotel, let's go find some food, Carol, and let's keep getting. Does that work for everybody? Anybody in disagreement with that?
All right, just from a logistics perspective, we'll meet in the lobby, depart at 1:30,
Right.
so that we have several folks that are meeting us along the way, so we don't have a lot of flexibility.
That's
time.
54, that's 54 minutes from now.